S-Men. Red Skull, being the dastardly devil he is, made some backup plans in the case of his eventual demise. One such plan was a clone of himself who would come back in the modern era. Okay, side note, why do villains do this, making clones of themselves? The individual villain still kind of passes away, so if they move their consciousness or something, that kind of makes sense, but I don't get why this is a thing. But I'm pretty sure this clone isn't even like that. I'm gonna make myself upset, so let's just continue. Basically, waking up in this new modern world with mutants and all that jazz, this new Red Skull decided that he was going to dig up the body of Professor X and steal some of his brain, granting himself some telepathy, and as an antithesis to the X-Men, he created the S-Men. Yes, very creative. This was a group of individuals that the Red Skull had empowered using crazy mad science and magic. Almost all of them were pretty quickly taken out of existence by Magneto when this Red Skull tried to make a camp to exterminate mutants. Bad move, buddy. Bad move. Number 9. Zodiac Cartel. Honestly, it's a pretty cool idea for a group. This villainous group of hand-picked business leaders who were all born under different zodiac signs, as their leader Cornelius Van Lunt, or Taurus, was heavily into astrology. Each member, while representing a zodiac sign, also was based in a different American city, and their main goal was world economic and political domination. Its members originally were, other than Cornelius, Scorpio, Jake Fury, Aquarius, Darren Bentley, Aries, Marcus Lassiter, Cancer, Jack Cleveno, Capricorn, Willard Weir, Gemini, Joshua Link, Leo, Daniel Radford, Libra, Gustav Brandt, Pisces, Noah Perricone, Sagittarius, Harlan Vargas, and my representative, Virgo, Elaine McLaughlin. The team was first formed after the dissolution of a previous group called the Great Wheel of Zodiac, which had covert agents from around the globe including Baron von Strucker, Dum Dum Dugan, and even Leonardo da Vinci. Its dissolution also led to the creation of S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra, and Leviathan as well, so you could definitely say it was important and somehow still relatively obscure. Number 8. Headmen. Sometimes it takes the smallest of things to bring people together, and while that may sound like an extremely beautiful sentiment, I'm saying it in relation to the villainous team known as the Headmen, who it seems came together because each of their powers revolves around their heads in one way or another, and it's honestly kind of unsettling in my opinion. Bonded together through their heads, these scientists sought out world domination, bringing them into conflict with the Defenders, She-Hulk, and Spider-Man. This quartet consisted of Arthur Nagin, their leader, who had his head transplanted onto the body of a gorilla, Ruby Thursday, who replaced her own head with an organic computer capable of changing shape, Gerald Morgan, aka Shrunken Bones, accidentally shrank his own skeleton, including his skull, so he basically has really baggy skin, and Chandu the Mystic's head has been transplanted by Nagin onto a number of different bodies throughout his time, making him quite versatile.
And at number 7, Adam Warlock and Thanos. Adam Warlock and Thanos have had a long-running history of being adversaries, but once upon a time the two actually worked together. In his earlier spacefaring days, Adam would come across the Universal Church of Truth, an intergalactic religious organization led by a villain named Magus. Teaming up with Pip the Troll, Gamora, and her adoptive papa Thanos, the group opposed Magus, and then discovered that Magus is actually a future version of Warlock who had traveled back in time and was forced insane by the use of his soul gem. With the Mad Titan's help, he travels into the future and steals his own soul in an attempt to prevent his evil self from ever existing, effectively killing himself. It wasn't until after all that Warlock and Thanos would clash, with Thanos getting his mitts on the other Infinity Gems to cause havoc. Moving on to number 6, Dracula and the X-Men. Dracula has a peculiar history with the members of the X-Men in both the 616 and alternate realities. In the 616 continuity, despite having an unruly past together, the mutant team and the infamous Vamp team up in order to restore the world of vampires in Curse of the Mutants, a storyline that took place between 2010 and 2011. Blade was there too. Essentially, they were forced to work together when Dracula's irritable son, Zarus, engineered a biological weapon that converted regular humans into vampires on a large scale. While no one died permanently, Jubilee technically died and became a child of the night, having been turned into a vampire during one of Zarus' attacks. Dracula hooked her up with an amulet to help her manage sunlight as a thank you gesture for the X-Men's help, and thus began a very strange period in Jubilee's narratives. Side note, she was eventually cured for vampirism, but it was a weird stage. Moving on to number 5, Hank Pym and Ultron. Oh, Hank. Oh, Hank. Come on, Hank. Hank Pym has had it rough. Most recently, he was manipulated by Ultron, appearing to have merged with the robot after the Rage of Ultron storyline. At first, it seemed as if it was a mutual decision, but as the story went on, it became clear that Ultron was calling the shots and doing the driving, so to speak. It just seems that Hank can never truly control his creation, and his weird feelings of sentimentality towards his robotic son will always result in his downfall some way. The whole thing ended with Hank getting his soul devoured by a demonic entity that lives inside of the Soul Stone in Soul World, seemingly killing him. But we're pretty sure that he'll be back, and hopefully not just as a sentient robot skin jacket. Moving on to number 4, Galactus and Cosmic Ghost Rider. Frank Castle's Cosmic Ghost Rider hails from an alternate universe in which Thanos had won and killed off all of Earth's heroes. Now, during that battle, Frank Castle hits his head via debris from the Hulk smashing into a building. He dies. He ends up in Hell, where he makes a deal with Mephisto to return, making him into Ghost Rider. But when he arrived back on Earth, it was too late. Thanos was gone. He roamed the desolate planet and eventually encountered Galactus, who had come into conflict with Thanos. Castle would offer the World Devourer his services and become his herald, becoming the Cosmic Ghost Rider, or more simply, the Rider. They would travel the galaxy together for centuries in an attempt to stop Thanos' quest to kill every living being in the universe, but eventually Thanos confronted them and beheaded Galactus, then offered Castle another option. If he was the Mad Titan's servant instead, he could punish more evil than he'd ever imagined. There's more to the story from there, of course, but in terms of his relationship with Galactus, their partnership ended when the mighty entity's death occurred.
Number 3, Menagerie. The Menagerie is likely a more recent evil team, showing up for the first time in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3, Number 1 in April of 2014, when they tried to steal valuable decorated eggs from an antique store and were pretty easily defeated. So like, from the get-go, the impressive feats are on the lower side of the list, if you know what I'm saying. In fact, I'd say the most famous thing they've done is when they disintegrated Spider-Man's spider suit, making him have to create web underwear for himself. And it's kind of the underwear that is remembered here, not the menagerie. The animal-themed criminal team was created by White Rabbit, and its members included Hippo, Ox, Skyne, who did the spider suit disintegrating, Squid, Swarm, and, wait for it, Panda Mania. Nice. The Menagerie also is known for trying to rob a club where Nadia Van Dyne was celebrating her birthday with numerous other heroes, which, as you can imagine, it didn't go too well for them. Number 2, Death Throes. Remember how the Headmen all came together based on their head-related powers? Well, I'll do you one better. How about the Death Throes, whose powers and names all have something to do with commonly throwing stuff? The ringleader, threw together teammates Bombshell, Knick-Knack, Oddball, Tenpin, and Throwdown into a group that works really well together, juggling their weapons between each other and doing battle with characters like Captain America, Crossfire, Hawkeye, and even Loki of all people, who stopped the group from robbing the big top casino in Las Vegas. The Marvel Wiki even lists their origins as quote-unquote joint effort to perform criminal and mercenary acts while using juggling expertise. I honestly kinda had a hoot putting together this point, as I can't believe this group of villains even exists.
And finally, in at number 1, the German Expressionist Trilogy. The German Expressionist Trilogy isn't known in name by that. Rather, it's a trilogy made up of 3 different graphic novels, all within the same world, yet each individually unique. The reason why these 3 are referenced as such is because the graphic novels are based on German Expressionist cinema. The first, Superman's Metropolis, is based off of Fritz Lang's film Metropolis. Batman Nosferatu is based off the classic horror film of the same name, and Wonder Woman the Blue Amazon takes after the Blue Angel. Metropolis takes place in the future, in the city of Metropolis, in which social inequality is a massive problem. An evil scientist named Luthor has the city wrapped around his finger, ends up seeking out the leader of the rising revolution, Lois Lane, and uses her to create a robotic duplicate that he names Futura. After learning about his alien origins, Clark ends up fighting Futura, rescues Lois, defeats Luthor, and he and Lois end up becoming the new enlightened rulers of the city. You kinda get the gist from that, with the films informing the plots of these stories, being adapted to fit into the origins of the 3 DC heroes that star within them.
Number 10, Dark Avengers. Okay. While I know the Dark Avengers may be seen to some as a group of supervillains, Norman Osborn was genuinely trying to create a replacement for a superhero team when he put them together. So though the team may be comprised of villains, I would still consider it a superhero team. While the Dark Avengers may not save the day like their more shiny and cordial counterparts, they are definitely more complex and interesting. The members of the team often have to work harder to save the day, working to overcome their own internal and moral struggles, wrestling with the type of person they want to be, and adapting to seeing themselves even as heroes. Number 9. Birds of Prey. DC's Birds of Prey are probably one of the most underrated team that DC has. While they are popular, it has taken quite a while for them to hit the mainstream. They appeared in the Batman animated series, had a short-lived TV show in the early 2000s, and have only now just got their own film. The saddest part of the film is that it won't even be exactly what you imagine if you're a huge fan of the comic series, subbing out Barbara Gordon's Oracle for Harley Quinn in terms of who appears to be acting as their leader on screen. The original core members for the team were Black Canary and Huntress, with Oracle acting as their leader. Gail Simone's inventive writing and all the strong girl power associated with the team is what puts this series in a league of its own. Although the team members often hold different morals or values, they manage to put them aside to work together and save the day, supporting one another. Girl power at its best. Number 8. Eternals. Why are the Eternals so cool? Because they help to build a bridge between the archetypal heroes of mythology and the modern superheroes we have today. The Eternals were created by Jack Kirby in 1976 as a group of superpowered and ancient beings who believed they were put on Earth by the Celestials to act as its defenders. Beyond being ancient and pretty much all-powerful, they have had an effect on the Earth's history by actually being the characters whom they share their names with from our own mythology. Circe, for example, is the same Circe who falls in love with and seduces Odysseus. Number 7. New Guardians. New Guardians is a team comprised of different colored lanterns, more specifically a representative from each color of lantern. The team originally banded together to take down the Black Lanterns, as multiple colors are required to defeat a Black Lantern, and all colors of the emotional spectrum are required to destroy Black Lanterns for good, by combining together to create White Light, the light of creation. Whether it's the old team or the newest version of the New Guardians, which has their own comic series and was brought together by Kyle Rayner, both are able to accomplish impressive feats when combining their powers. Number 6. Defenders. I'm not talking about the television show. For this one, we are going straight to the comics and straight to the original Defenders lineup. This team was a team of happenstance brought together by Dr. Stephen Strange to defeat Yandroth. The team's inaugural members were Namor the Submariner, Hulk, and Silver Surfer. Definitely an impressive group to start. Other long-term members include Hellcat, Nighthawk, Valkyrie, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist. Although the original Defenders team shares some members with their TV counterpart, the premise felt much more orchestrated than the comics' ragtag crew of powerhouses. Number 5. Fantastic Four. Truly the heart at the center of Marvel. The Fantastic Four are believed to have come about at a time when the offices were actually just about ready to close due to financial strain. They saved Marvel, and for that reason alone, in the sense that simply their creation saved the day and paved the way for teams like the Avengers who would come after them, they are one of the best teams that Marvel has. Yeah, did you know that Fantastic Four actually came first? They debuted in 1961, whereas the Avengers would not make their comic appearance until 1963. Without the Fantastic Four, we probably would not even have the Avengers. Fantastic Four was a labor of love for Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, the same team that brought us the Avengers, and created countless other well-loved Marvel characters. Fantastic Four were designed to push boundaries when it came to the idea of what a superhero was. Lee wanted them to be flawed, almost monstrous, which ultimately changed the story for a superhero. They didn't go out looking to protect humanity, they were just brilliant minds and explorers who were simply tasked with the responsibility after a tragic accident resulted in them getting superpowers. Number 4. Doom Patrol. The best thing about this group is that they are so outlandish. While Marvel may have the X-Men and Fantastic Four, this team truly stands in a league of their own. They also came out just slightly ahead of the X-Men, though I would argue the two definitely have enough differences to make them stand apart in the best of ways. Namely that Doom Patrol does not try to sugarcoat the bizarre. They truly embrace their weirdness, and it's glorious. This is especially highlighted during Grant Morrison's run in the series, whose style was then also incorporated into the DCEU show for Doom Patrol. In fact, while Marvel is good at consistently creating a dark, real world for their own superhero dramas thus far, I would say Doom Patrol is the DC show that proves why it just really works better for DC than Marvel. It's a show that is able to take the bizarre and tie it to reality by exploring how one would really deal with the scenarios that we see the team come up against. They are just as surprised as we are. Doom Patrol doesn't just force or paint on the idea of dark or strange. Doom Patrol is dark and strange. Number 3. Guardians of the Galaxy. Many casual superhero fans had not even heard about this team before they joined the MCU, it's true. Despite that the original comic book team were not quite as successful as the Avengers, I would still argue that in some areas even they are still better. Remember, better isn't all about money and success, and to add to that, the MCU Guardians are definitely better than MCU Avengers. Both versions of the Guardians are actually more out there, making it easier for their fans to be able to enjoy more outlandish stories without question. Let's not forget the original Guardians squad was comprised of supers from the future and a ton of different aliens. One of the members, Krugar, was even Sorcerer Supreme, and the original Alita was actually 2 entities sharing one body. Alita and Stakar Orgod were both Starhawk. A prime example of how crazy their stories were can be given by taking a look at the character of Starhawk. These step-siblings and later married couple took turns inhabiting the superpowered being while the other just chilled in limbo. The two ended up being married, had kids, but divorced after Stakar started hogging time as Starhawk. In terms of the MCU, Guardians is funnier and feels more likely to just take us anywhere. Its heroes are often more complex as they strive to do good, but also are sometimes just a band of space pirates. Also, Groot. Need I say more? Number 2. Teen Titans. Whether you're reading the comics or watching the original animated series Teen Titans, this group of superheroes are great. Mostly because of their bonds and how grounded they often are, while still being so fantastical and super. Especially when watching the animated series, I always found the problems they would deal with would have an underlying arc that would be kind of relatable. It's taking small problems, enlarging them to make them more entertaining, but still keeping an amount of honesty and relatability to keep you connected. Storytelling at its best. While the MCU may be known for having some of Hollywood's best talent around, the animated Teen Titans had some of the best voices, including Tara Strong, Ron Perlman, and Kevin Michael Richardson. Number 1. X-Men. Yeah, you probably knew I was going there if you know me. The X-Men have been around for just as long as the Avengers, but their stories have been ever more zany and interesting. Okay, so granted, some of the Avengers plots have been kinda zany, but usually more zany in a problematic way than the X-Men's plots, which are usually just weird as heck instead, and a lot more fun. Remember when Kitty Pryde got stuck in a giant bullet and was lost in space for years till Magneto pulled her back? Or when Jubilee became a vampire? And those two X-Men aren't even considered the mains of the main roster. The best thing about the X-Men is even if you've fallen off the bandwagon with them at some point, they always have something to bring you back into the fold. Hickman's newest X-Men series have done just that, reimagining the X-Men but still managing to continue the continuity. If you are behind on House of X or Powers of X, by the way, or if you've just left the X-Men behind, you need to come back and you need to read these new series. They are both brilliant. I'm so excited for all the new X-Men comics. Number 10. Alpha Flight. This might be a controversial way to start off this list, but I truly do believe that Alpha Flight can be more powerful than the Avengers team, especially if we're talking about consistent teamwork, which the Avengers members sometimes struggle with due to, well, butting heads with each other. I mean, people on the Avengers have straight up killed their other teammates before. That is just a fact. I mean, I did a whole list about the amount of times Iron Man has been basically killed by his teammates, and after talking it over with Andrew, it seems like Alpha Flight also has a better system in place for making sure their team not only works smoothly, but also that members are well trained before even earning their place on the team due to the existence of both Beta Flight and Gamma Flight, which were initially used as training teams. Although Gamma Flight has kind of become something else in recent years, but yes. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by giving this video a little like? Click that thumbs up. Number 9. Midnight Suns. Midnight Suns is basically Marvel's main magical team. At least currently that's who we got. Midnight Suns typically deal with threats that are more mystical or supernatural in nature. They were brought together initially by Doctor Strange to fight against Lilith and her small army of demonic offspring known as the Lilin, which I mean, of course this team would be brought together by Doctor Strange, right? Each member of the original team roster had interacted with the Lilin before, which was what tied them all together. Team members and leaders have included Doctor Strange, Wong, Blade, Morbius, Magic, Nico Minoru, Wolverine, Zoe Laveau, Kushala, Dr. Voodoo, Elsa Bloodstone, multiple Ghost Riders, Hannibal King, Hellstrom, Iron Fist, Man-Thing, Jennifer Kale, Ben Reilly, Victoria Montesi, and Werewolf by Night. It's a lot of supernatural and mystical people. Number 8. Web Warriors. The Web Warriors are a fantastic multiversal team that spun out of the events of Spider-Verse. But even before they existed in the comics, they and the Spider-Verse were inspired by the team-ups of multiversal Spider-Man in the 90s Spider-Man animated series. The Web Warriors were brought together by the multiversal threat of the Inheritors, who hunted down various alternate Spider people, known as Spider Totems, across the Marvel multiverse. After they were defeated during the Spider-Verse event and the dust had settled, the Web Warriors were created to defend those worlds, who were left afterwards without a hero. Considering how powerful Peter Parker's Spider-Man is, I think you can understand how a team made up of various alternate versions of the character would be off the charts when it comes to their power level. I mean, Spider-Man himself is pretty crazy, like a team of Spider-Men. I wish we had an Avengers team that was actually just like different Spider people. That could be pretty cool. Number 7. Fantastic Four. The Fantastic Four, despite being often smaller in number, though they have expanded beyond that number over the years, is still mightier, I'd say, than the Avengers. But I also feel like that's to be expected. After all, the FF were one of the first Marvel teams and are referred to fondly as Marvel's first family. So if anything, I consider them kind of like the first team. The Fantastic Four usually is made up of the 4 initial friends and relatives who are forever changed by exposure to cosmic rays during their first voyage out into space. At least that's the original origin story. The team has had countless heroes join their ranks here and there over the years. Well, you know Mr. Fantastic, Invisible Woman, Human Torch, and The Thing. Some other members on the FF roster have included the Hulk, Wolverine, Ghost Rider, Spider-Man, Storm, She-Hulk, Nova, Moon Girl, Devil Dinosaur, Crystal, and Black Panther, among others. Number 6. The Quiet Council. They aren't really a team of superheroes, but the title of this video is simply Marvel Teams More Powerful Than the Avengers, and the Quiet Council, I would consider them to be a team still. They're a team of folks in the Marvel Universe. Granted, their team is more about protecting their power and their nation of Krakoa, but hey, I think it still counts. The Krakoan Quiet Council as such is composed of not just mutant superheroes, but mutant villains as well, as Krakoa is said to be a place for all mutants, where past misdeeds are forgiven in the name of creating a better tomorrow and a safe haven for all mutants. Current members include some of the most prominent, iconic, and powerful mutants in all of existence: Destiny, Hope Summers, Storm, Exodus, Professor X, Emma Frost, Mr. Sinister, Captain Kate Pryde, Mystique, and Sebastian Shaw. Formerly, the Council also featured such additional powerhouses as Apocalypse, Magneto, and Jean Grey, besides. Number 5. X-Men. I mean, of course I was going to put the X-Men on this list. Y'all know me, I'm a huge mutant fan. And the premier mutant team in the comics, of course, is the X-Men. I've also loved that over the years the X-Men has become more of a global team than just necessarily an American one. Unlike the Avengers, which has tended to remain mostly American in terms of their prominent team members throughout the years. I mean, most of the people on the Avengers tend to be American, not always, but I feel like the X-Men is a little bit more global in that regard. Although they do also have a lot of American members. I mean, based in New York. It's Marvel Comics. X-Men's current and previous lineup have also been exceptionally strong, and even the OG X-Men roster featured some mutants who are still considered the most powerful even today, and who are still around, of course, in the comics even today. The current roster features Cyclops, Firestar, Forge, Iceman, Havoc, Magic, Jean Grey, aka Marvel Girl, and Synch. Honestly, Synch is also alone just so amazing, and has taken the meaning of teamwork to another level, I think. Synch. Such an underrated character that now is getting his time in the spotlight. Number 4. Eternals. The Eternals are another team that deserve more love when it comes to the comics and when it comes to their powers. They're a team made up of literal immortal beings who are extremely resistant to dying, but up until recently anyways, even if they did die, they would actually quickly return to life thanks to the machine which rebuilds and resurrects them and is integrated, or was integrated, with the planet Earth, which is actually itself a living mechanism of sorts. The Eternals recently had a killer comic series written by Kieran Gillen that I would also highly recommend you check out. This is a series that will make you a fan if you weren't already. The Eternals all also possess a unique power comparable to a powerful ability of mutant villain Apocalypse. They can manipulate and alter their own molecular structure, having complete control of it. And some, like Circe, can even manipulate matter in general, be it organic or inorganic. Number 3. God Squad. The God Squad was brought together to combat another group of gods, the Skrull Pantheon. The team made their first appearance in Incredible Hercules issue 117, but while Hercules would become their leader, they were actually brought together by Athena's command. Although she didn't serve on the team, a bunch of other super powerful individuals and gods did. With Hercules leading, their roster over time also included Thor, Circe, the Silver Surfer, Ajax, Amadeus Cho, Snowbird, Mikaboshi, Adam, Galactus, and Venus. The God Squad only made a few appearances, but I still think they're a super cool team, and I'm still disappointed we didn't get to see them in Thor Love and Thunder. I was kinda hoping. God Squad, but alas. Number 2. The Annihilators. The Annihilators are an insane cosmic team, and you know how I feel about the cosmic world of Marvel. It's probably one of the most powerful areas. The Annihilators first appeared in Thanos Imperative Devastation issue number 1, and were created by Dan Abnett, Andy Lanning, and Miguel Sepulveda, during a time when the Guardians were getting a refresh by Abnett and Lanning in the comics. The team was actually inspired by Star-Lord himself, who had an idea for a truly badass team of galactic Guardians, which Cosmo put into action. The team has featured Beta Ray Bill, Silver Surfer, Gladiator, Icon, Quasar, and Ronan the Accuser. At one point they used their powers to combine two suns together and prevented them from going supernova. So yeah, that's the power level that we're talking about. Number 1. The Defenders. I feel like the Defenders is a team that is often forgotten, but is randomly like one of the best superhero teams we've ever seen from Marvel. Perhaps this also has to do with the fact that none of its members ever really wanted to join or be there, at least not initially. The Defenders was the name given initially to the reluctant team up of the Hulk, Namor, and Doctor Strange, with Strange acting as the de facto leader of the team. Also, just having Doctor Strange as the leader of any team makes it pretty impressive, hence why the Midnight Suns are also on here. When it comes to Avengers teams, he tends to be more elusive, and even solo, he's known for being a powerhouse, so combine him with other powerhouses on a team, albeit ones, you know, in different categories like the Hulk and Namor, and you can see how this team becomes seemingly unstoppable. In fact, I feel like the fact that each of these heroes, you know, kind of has their own thing going on is what makes the Defenders so great. And they've also had a lot of other people join them throughout the years that have also been insane. As long as they all happen to be working together, the Defenders is a pretty great team, which of course, especially in the beginning, wasn't always the case. But hey, they figured it out.
Number 10. Doom Patrol. This team of freaks were all victims of accidents caused by the scientist Niles Caulder. These accidents made the team members outcasts, but also granted them amazing powers which made them capable of amazing feats. They also have members who would match up well against many members of the Silver Age Justice League. Their leader, Niles Caulder, has a tactical brain that rivals that of Batman. Lucius Reynolds can wield magic and is capable of pyrokinesis, which could make him a problem for Martian Manhunter and could dehydrate Aquaman, who in the Silver Age needed to be exposed to water every hour. Danny the Street could make himself a yellow, inescapable void, thus trapping Green Lantern. One of Kay Chalice's personalities can see the future, making her a good candidate to go up against and counter Flash's super speed. Elastigirl's power to grow to huge heights is similar to Wonder Woman's recurring villain Giganta, making them a good matchup, and Negative Man can produce radiation, which he recently used in the latest World's Finest run by Mark Waid to imitate the effects of Krypton's red sun, meaning that he could depower Superman. He could also use this power to give Batman cancer, so all in all, the Doom Patrol is not to be trifled with. Number 9. The Teen Titans. A team consisting of the various sidekicks and young heroes of the DC universe, many fans would assume that the Justice League would have no trouble taking out this team. But I would argue that the Silver Age version of the team is less powerful than most of the more infamous Titans lineups. I mean, Silver Age Batman is the guy who wore a different colored bat suit every night to try and distract criminals from Robin's broken arm. In a fight between him and Nightwing, Tim Drake, or Damian, I would put my money on any of the Robins who have been on the Titans 9 times out of 10. Silver Age Martian Manhunter's weakness is fire? Well, good luck with Starfire. Superman would probably pair up best against Raven, whose magic would give him some trouble. Miss Martian's mind control would be effective against Green Lantern. Between members like Cyborg, Supergirl, Power Girl, and Beast Boy, I think Aquaman and Wonder Woman could be handled. The only leaguer I'm having trouble with is the Flash. Any ideas? Let me know in the comments. Number 8. The Shazamily. Billy Batson, aka Shazam's family of heroes are a powerful force to be reckoned with, and though their youth and inexperience might be a disadvantage if they were fighting the modern League, you have to remember how often the Silver Age heroes made really bizarre, borderline stupid decisions. Superman and Shazam have a history of going toe-to-toe and are pretty evenly matched, so they pretty much cancel each other out. Black Adam is currently a member of the Shazamily, and when he fought Martian Manhunter in the World War III storyline, Black Adam beat him so hard that he left the planet crying. So no issues there. That leaves 5 Shazam family members: Freddy, Darla, Mary, Pedro, and Eugene, all of whom have the powers of Shazam and their magical tiger Tawny against 4 Leaguers: Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, and Aquaman. This version of Batman isn't really suited for this kind of fight, so whether or not the remaining 3 League could survive would really depend on how long it would take Black Adam to murder Martian Manhunter. Number 7. The Justice Society. Before the Justice League was introduced in 1960, the superhero team of the DC Universe was the Justice Society of America. They helped the Allied forces in World War II and have helped to keep the world safe ever since. This team gets a lot of points against the League due to the technicality we established in the intro. Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman were all members of both teams, so won't be considered in this hypothetical matchup. While that removes a lot of the League's heavy hitters, the JSA is still left with a considerable roster that would make them a nightmare for the remaining Leaguers. Black Adam is a member of this team as well, so as stated before, he could handle Martian Manhunter like he did in the World War III storyline. In a fight between Silver Age Aquaman and Hawkman and Hawkgirl, Arthur Curry is coming out of it as fish food. The JSA has their own Flash and Green Lanterns in the form of Jay Garrick and Alan Scott, so that would put the JSA on almost even footing. But once you include additional members like Blue Beetle, Cyclone, and Atom Smasher, and Mr. Terrific, I think the JSA takes it through sheer numbers. Number 6. Young Justice. Yet another beloved team of young heroes who were mostly sidekicks who formed their own team, Young Justice wouldn't last long against the modern Justice League, but once again, you have to take into account the weaknesses inherent to the Silver Age versions of the characters. For example, while you might assume that the first Aquaman, Arthur Curry, would wipe the floor with the new Aquaman and former Aqualad, Jackson Hyde, the Silver Age version of Arthur wasn't summoning leviathans or causing tidal waves, he was riding dolphins and hanging out with an octopus named Topo. As I said in the Titans entry, Tim Drake vs. Silver Age Batman is no contest. Teen Lantern might not be a match for Green Lantern, but if any member of the team simply painted themselves yellow, they would probably be fine. Superboy would probably take Superman by surprise with the sheer level of brutality he was capable of, and although he probably wouldn't win, if he teamed up with a character like Sideways who can open rifts to other dimensions, they could probably get him off the board for a while. Martian Manhunter could be trouble, but Jenny Hex's power negation abilities and the sheer power of characters like Amethyst and Naomi McDuffie, I think they could handle him. Wonder Girl and Silver Age Wonder Woman are probably about on par, and Impulse would be able to at least slow down the Flash, but the Young Justice ringer is Summer Pickens, who can dial her H-phone and be replaced with a hero from the Heroverse who can handle the task for her. Number 5. Justice League Dark. This subset of the League is dedicated to dealing with supernatural or mystic threats to the Earth, and has many of DC's most powerful magic wielders as members. Wonder Woman was a member of both teams, so she won't be considered in this entry. A member like Deadman, who can possess people, would be a good way to take out the Flash. The demon Etrigan almost killed the modern Batman in Kevin Smith's Widening Gyre, so Silver Age Bats is totally screwed. He's also yellow, so he could cause a lot of problems for Green Lantern. Superman's magic weakness would make him particularly vulnerable to all of the members of this team, but mostly Zatanna. And don't tell me you wouldn't love to see Silver Age Aquaman go up against the chain-smoking magic wielder John Constantine, who could just use magic to dehydrate him. All that leaves is Martian Manhunter, while the Dark Justice League still has a surplus of fighters like Dr. Fate, Swamp Thing, and Enchantress, just to name a few. Number 4. The Legion of Superheroes. The Legion of Superheroes are a massive team of superpowered people from various worlds in the 30th century. They have a history of traveling through time to team up with a young Clark Kent and preventing disasters before they happen. Unfortunately for the League, this means that their most powerful member is benched for this round. A Legion member like Element Lad, who can transmute common elements, like water, into other things, could take out this version of Aquaman pretty fast, while the Chemical Kid's ability to affect the chemical reactions in the body would cause Batman to go into toxic shock. Dragonwing can breathe fire, which would make Martian Manhunter have some issues. Despite Superman being off the board for both teams, the Daxamite Mon-El has a very similar power set to the Man of Steel and would be a real challenge for Wonder Woman, especially if he teamed up with another member of the team, Superman's son John. There's no one hero who could break the Flash's stride, but considering there are like 24 Legion of superhero members I haven't mentioned, the Legion would take this fight over the original Justice League through sheer numbers. Number 3, the Bat Family. So obviously Batman is off the table for this pair-up of the League versus the various sidekicks that Batman has trained over the years. While I don't think that the modern Bat Family could take out the original League in open combat, their experience over the years in guerrilla tactics and their access to a Bat computer full of plans designed to take out way more powerful versions of the League's heroes would give them a definite edge. But even if we take away those plans as they were developed by Batman, the Bat Family has the know-how to formulate effective contingency plans of their own. In the recent Robin and Batman miniseries, we learned that coming up with plans to take out superpowered beings was one of the first lessons Dick Grayson was taught when he was introduced to the Justice League and the Teen Titans. Characters like Tim Drake and Damian Wayne have shown a keen tactical mind, with Damian repeatedly bragging about how he would plan to take out the superheroes of the League. These Robins, teamed with other members like the various Batgirls, Batwing, Signal, and Huntress, would be more than smart enough to come up with their own plans to take out the Silver Age heroes of the League. We know they have access to Kryptonite, although Damian claims to have a plan to defeat Superman in the comics that is magic-based. Dick Grayson beat up Green Lantern as a child in All-Star Batman and Robin after painting an entire room and himself yellow, so Nightwing would have no issues as an adult going up against the Silver Age version of the character. I like the mental image of Silver Age Aquaman having to try and go 10 rounds with the Red Hood, and although Flash, Martian Manhunter, and Wonder Woman would be difficult to deal with, the Bat Family could take them out, and I know how cliched this sounds, if they had enough prep time. Number 2, the Green Lantern Corps. This intergalactic group of space cops use the power of will to fuel their Green Lantern rings, which allow them to create powerful constructs limited only by the user's imagination. While the logic I've used so far on this list on how other heroes could defeat Silver Age Green Lantern may initially sound like something the Silver Age League could use to their advantage, this weakness no longer affects the modern Green Lantern Corps. It was revealed that the weakness yellow was due to the being Parallax being trapped in the Green Lantern's central power battery on the planet Oa and causing an impurity. This impurity has since been removed, meaning that the League painting themselves yellow wouldn't help them. Both the Corps and the League obviously lose Hal Jordan due to him being on both teams, but that still leaves dozens of Green Lanterns for the 6 remaining Leaguers to try and deal with. While having the Flash, Wonder Woman, and Superman would make the League last longer than you might think, the sheer size and power of the Green Lantern Corps, with powerful members of later iterations of the League such as John Stewart and Guy Gardner, would make the Justice League outmatched. But maybe we'd get to see Batman take out Guy Gardner with a single punch again before it happened. Number 1, the Superman family. The Superman family might just be one of the most OP superhero teams in the DC universe, with many of its members having the same powers as the Man of Steel. In this hypothetical matchup, the Silver Age Justice League simply wouldn't stand a chance. Not only do they lose their most powerful team member due to the technicality, but they have to go up against heroes like Supergirl, Superboy, and the John Kent Superman. I think Kara Zor-El is the most interesting matchup against this version of Wonder Woman, and that Power Girl could take out Green Lantern with John Kent wiping the floor with Silver Age Aquaman. Martian Manhunter would be dangerous with his mind control, but a bolt of heat vision from Superboy would probably be sufficient. The Flash is tricky but by no means impossible to defeat in his Silver Age iteration, and honestly the biggest threat to the Super family would be Batman with his kryptonite. But Lana Lang's Superwoman is not affected by this, so she should be okay. Anyone left over from the fight would be in no condition to keep going for long, which is when the last line of defense would kick in. A super dog, cat, and monkey, all with the powers of the Man of Steel. Honestly, the Superman family is so powerful that even the modern version of the Justice League would have trouble triumphing over them if it ever came to blows between the two groups.
Number 10, the Wizard and Trapster. These two would go on to become important founding members of the Frightful Four villain team, but even before that, they were teaming up together. Way back when Trapster was known simply as Paste Pot Pete, these two worked together in Strange Tales in an effort to defame and defeat the Human Torch, Johnny Storm. In the end, the Torch escaped their trap and apprehended both of them, turning them in, but still, for two C or D-list villains, they came pretty close to killing the Fantastic Four hero, using Pete's pace and an airtight room that was quickly being drained of its oxygen. Also, I don't know if the Wizard's actually a C-list villain. I might actually bump him up. Also, Paste Pot Pete is hard to say if you say it like 3 times fast. Number 9, Crime Syndicate. As much as I love the Crime Syndicate and think that they are an awesome team of villains, they are also pretty dysfunctional, which is why they are ranked so low on our list. However, despite the fact that they are often depicted as being at one another's throats and sneaking behind one another's backs in order to basically make sure that they themselves come out on top with the most power, they still manage to have an impressive amount of horrendous achievements, or almost achievements at least. The Crime Syndicate is still a supervillain team that proves to be extremely dangerous whenever our heroes come up against them, though they would probably be more frightening to face if they could do a little bit better at actually working together like a team instead of constantly double-crossing one another. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and comment below if you want to help us out here at the channel. I promise you it does really help, and we appreciate all your likes and comments. Thank you. Number 8. Daredevil Revenge Squad. Not the official name for this team, I don't think. This team was Typhoid Mary's group of villains. She recruited them to help her get revenge on Daredevil, and they all also had their own motives for doing him harm. All villains who had basically been slighted by the Red Devil themselves in the past. What's more, although this team up only lasted a few issues, it was actually brutally successful, with Typhoid Mary even using her Mary persona at the end of Daredevil issue 259 to kind of ensnare Matt Murdock into letting his guard down around her. Typhoid Mary recruited the Wild Boys, Ammo, Bullet, and Bushwhacker to help her get the deed done, but insisted on taking the final moment of defeat for herself. Also, is it just me, or does Typhoid Mary look huge in this issue? She looks so tall. I'm just like, wow, what's happening? I don't hate it.
Number 7. Circus of Crime. Fritz Tybalt, then manager and ringmaster of a small Austrian circus, became active in the Axis powers during World War II. He was asked by German intelligence to take his circus to the United States of America to give performances in major cities while actually using his circus members' powers and talents in order to take out government officials. Fritz Tybalt's evil circus of crime consisted of Omir the Snake Charmer, Tommy Thumb, the Trapeze Trio, and Zandow the Strongman. However, Tybalt, who came to be known as the Ringmaster of Death, was captured by Captain America. But fast forward, and the Circus of Crime's new MO was giving a performance to a large audience. Then the Ringmaster would use the powerful mind control device in his hat to put the audience into a trance. The circus members then robbed the audience, who would remember nothing about the thefts when the Ringmaster released them from the trance, and the performance continued. This criminal circus fought the Hulk, Spider-Man, the Hawkeyes, the Avengers, and others. Number 6. The UFOs. These villains and their cleverly chosen team names. UFOs, like UFOs, because they got their powers in space. Yes, of course. Someone get me out of here, please. Okay, the UFOs here, inspired by the powers gained by the Fantastic Four, went to great lengths trying to reproduce the same accident that gave those heroes their abilities. The attempt succeeded, but they were interrupted by Bruce Banner, who discovered their ground control facility and was able to bring the shuttle down, because he thought it had been exposed to the cosmic radiation by accident. They were none too happy, as they thought they could have been made even stronger if he had not interfered, and they displayed their newfound powers in a frankly pretty awesome fight with the Incredible Hulk, even if they lost. Vapor has the ability to alter her form into any known gas. Vector gained the power of telekinesis from cosmic rays. X-Ray has been permanently transformed into a living energy field with the power to expel forms of heavy radiation capable of hurting even the Hulk. Ironclad has been permanently transformed into organic metal steel. He has superhuman strength, durability, and the ability to decrease or increase his own weight. His fight with the Hulk literally shook the universe, which is super cool. You should probably check him out.
Starting us off in at number 10, Spider-Man and Zatanna. This team up occurred in a Marvel Team Up comic. We're talking Marvel Team Up issue 81 from 1979. We're talking Marvel Team Up issue 81 from 1979. It saw Peter Parker's web-slinger teaming up with the daughter of Satan, Zatanna. Creative name there, Satan. Not self-involved whatsoever. Anywho, this story, titled Last Rites, Doctor Strange finds himself manipulated by the Shiotra Book of the Damned, causing him to become an agent of Basilisk, turning him into a werewolf. Spider-Man has to track him down, and Satana gets involved, with her mission being to restore Doctor Strange's soul to normal or kill him as a last resort if she fails. By the end of the team-up, Satana is faced with a choice to either save her own life or save Strange's soul, and she ends up going with the Doctor's, which actually went over pretty well with fans because she wasn't a super overly popular character. And at number 9, the Micronauts and Baron Karza. This one is kind of weird. It's a team-up between the Micronauts and Baron Karza. Karza is kind of like a cross between an evil knight, Darth Vader, and a sad Doctor Doom impersonator. He's the former royal chief scientist of Homeworld, who used his technology to overthrow the monarchy of Homeworld, taking control of a large chunk of the microverse before his archenemies, the Micronauts, defeated him. Here we see an instance where they were on the same side though, and their foe? Professor Charles Xavier. The team-up took place during the X-Men Micronauts crossover series, with the unlikely coupling leading Karza's fleet against a seemingly all-powerful entity. Turns out that this mysterious entity's power is traced to Charles Xavier. Spoiler alert, it's his dark side. And when they track him down at the X-Mansion, eventually this entity turns the mutants against the Micronauts, apparently kills a bunch of people, and Kitty Pryde and Karza sort of accidentally switch bodies. Things get weirder and devolve into the entity trying to rape Kitty, who is actually Karza, and this evil Xavier entity gets pervy with Danielle Moonstar to the point where he's actually psychically fondling her. Like, not even joking. The story ends with Xavier being the one who kills off the entity, although claims that the darkness inside of each of us is never fully gone, even when defeated. Ooh. Can we just talk about how an aspect of Xavier's personality just got real evil and pervy, and everyone was like totally cool with that, with him being like, I fixed it, don't worry guys, but it's still there deep down. Like, how are the X-Men not being like, yo, this is kind of Moving on to number 8, Doctor Doom and Namor. Namor, despite having quite antagonistic qualities, definitely qualifies as an anti-hero, so it should be no surprise that he was the hero side of this very first team-up in Marvel's Supervillain Team-Up Volume 1, Issue 1. The story starts with Namor getting huffy and calling off their alliance, and then Doom moping around about it and being all like, I don't need a lackey, I need a friend. So he decides that he's going to try to recruit Namor one more time to convince him otherwise, but he's super sketch about it. He ends up using a tracking device disguised as a fish to follow Namor, because that's totally a way to rebuild the trust of an ally who just abandoned you. Despite this, they team up again and all is going fine and dandy until Namor witnesses Doom executing one of Atoma's defenseless lackeys in Supervillain Team Up Issue 3, causing the two of them to get into a big brawl in Supervillain Team Up Issue 4. Sometimes you just gotta reel it in a bit, Victor. Come on, dude. Just take a step back. Don't be weird about it.
Number 7, Gotham City Sirens. Definitely one of the hottest supervillain team-ups out there in my opinion. Gotham City Sirens isn't just awesome because it's a team of powerful villains, but because it also cemented a fantastic friendship between the 3 main team members that we can always go back to, and I kinda love that. The Gotham City Sirens are Catwoman, Poison Ivy, and Harley Quinn, who sometimes also have other allies who join them in their villainous adventures. And also, let's be honest, heroic adventures, such as the Carpenter, Jenna Duffy, formerly part of the Wonderland gang. While this team up is one made up of criminals, the team of powerhouses also brought a lot of good out in each other and ended up actually performing a lot of heroic missions together despite their villainous pasts. So this might be a team up of villains, but it's also kind of a hero team in a weird way, kind of like doing a little bit of both, which I love. Number 6, Sinister Six. I didn't realize that I made the Sinister Six number 6. I just did that. That was not intentional. I'll take it, but it was not intentional, just so y'all know. While the Sinister Six definitely have their setbacks as a team, there is a reason why they are one of the favorites when it comes to supervillain groups and team-ups. I'm still waiting for them in the MCU. Please, please Marvel, give them to me. With the combined strength and skills of these villains, it seems that no scheme is outside of their reach. In reality though, they usually end up in a competition to prove who is the better, which ends with them betraying one another, usually costing them their victories. But this team has still come close to defeating Spider-Man on multiple occasions, and despite their setbacks, they are a team that you can always rely on to find their way back to one another, even if it means sometimes recruiting some new members to their ranks in the process. Also, I'm all for new members being included to the ranks. There's so many good Spider-Man villains, why limit ourselves? Give me the Sinister 60. Number 5. Dr. Psycho and Riddler and parademons. Dr. Psycho ends up allying himself with the Riddler in the Harley Quinn animated series. Originally it's Harley who wants to team up with Darkseid with her gang, but in the end she ends up surrendering her army of parademons that Darkseid supplied her with after realizing she's really doing all of this, conquering Earth to try and escape her romantic feelings for Poison Ivy, who is about to get married to Kite Man at this point in the series. Yikes, awkward. Dr. Psycho ends up becoming the big bad of the latest season in the end, with Riddler becoming his partner in crime and wielding great control over the leftover parademon army on Earth, which he has no qualms about using, unlike Harley, who's like, yeah, maybe I'm going a little too far. But yeah, Psycho's into it. A little too into it. Very much too into it. Number 4, Juggernaut and Black Tom Cassidy. These two aren't just great villains when it comes to their working relationship, they were also like fast friends and kind of best friends. I love it. Black Tom and Juggernaut have been good friends and allies since Black Tom's first full appearance in the comics in Uncanny X-Men issue 101. And I know what you guys are thinking. You're thinking, oh, but Amanda, that wasn't Black Tom's first appearance, but it was his first full appearance. So I believe his first cameo appearance was like issue 99, but don't quote me on that. Only a few issues later, they were already proving themselves to be a deadly duo as they teamed up to successfully kidnap and torment the X-Men in the hopes that this would inspire Professor Xavier to offer his own life up in exchange for his students' freedom. Unfortunately, they ended up getting tricked by Nightcrawler and ultimately were defeated. But still, this was a pretty good attempt to defeat the X-Men and Charles Xavier. Juggy's never gonna get over that. Or well, actually, yeah, he'll probably never get over it. I stand by what I said. It's gotta be hard for Juggernaut right now. Like, all of the mutants are off in Krakoa, and he's not a mutant. It's challenging.
Moving on to number 3, Avengers and Kang the Conqueror. This team up is slightly different than the others on our list. It involves trying to resurrect a character via a team up and then trying to kill one half of said team up unsuccessfully. Once upon a time, Kang the Conqueror teamed up with Earth's mightiest heroes, and it resulted in the death of the woman he loved. Or rather, she kinda just remained dead, because they had previously kind of been responsible for her death and he was really sore about it, sort of. So in the Avengers issue 69, Kang goes to the Avengers and informs them that the Grandmaster has put him in a precarious position. If the Avengers can defeat the Grandmaster's champions, the Squadron Sinister, he'll give Kang the power of life over death to resurrect Ravonna, Kang's love. Now for context, Ravonna was killed off prior when the Avengers and Kang clashed, having sacrificed herself in order to prevent Kang from being killed by a traitor. Now in this story, the Avengers won, but Kang gets foolish and uses his power to try to kill the Avengers instead and fails to do so, meaning he just kinda has to relive the pain of his love being dead again because he failed and it's his fault she's not alive this time. It's all very sad. And at number 2, Charles Xavier and Magneto in Dawn of X. Here's a case in which a team up effectively led to the fate of a character being worse than death. The new Dawn of X reboot of the X-Men franchise now sees Charles Xavier and his X-Men having had enough. They're done relying on the hope that humanity can learn to accept mutant kind, done with the oppression that they've dealt with for decades. Xavier ends up teaming up with Magneto, with the two of them primarily calling the shots with the new mutant sovereign nation that exists on Krakoa. This new sovereign state demands that mutants who have committed crimes are accountable by their mutant laws versus human laws out in the regular world, with one of these mutant laws being that they do not kill other mutants. Enter Sabretooth, who has been up to no good and is apprehended by the Fantastic Four outside of Krakoa. Cyclops shows up to take him to Krakoa for the mutants there to be the ones to decide his punishment. When Cyclops takes him over there, Xavier exiles Sabretooth, sending him into what he calls a stasis, deep inside of Krakoa. The ground opened up and Creed was dropped into it. Xavier claims that he'll be in there forever. I quote, "because that is how long mutant justice lasts." While he does note that Sabretooth might one day have the option to redeem himself, his fate is worse than any prison or death. To forever fall through the dark depths of a sentient creature for all of eternity? Yeah, yikes. That's like kinda savage, Xavier. You tolerate that, but you don't tolerate prisons? And finally, in at number 1, everybody during Crisis on Infinite Earths. Crisis on Infinite Earths is one of the most prominent crossovers in DC history, and an impactful one to boot. Essentially, the purpose of this crossover was to reboot the DC multiverse and create a single unified DC universe. The story itself involved everyone in DC's roster, for the most part, getting involved to prevent the Anti-Monitor from completely destroying the multiverse. The Monitor, his good counterpart, tries to recruit heroes from across the multiverse to help, but is murdered. And then Brainiac tries to take advantage of the situation, but ultimately, in the end, all of the heroes and all of the villains are brought together by the Spectre to work together. Crisis is known for its surprisingly high death toll, killing off the likes of heroes such as Kara Zor-El and Barry Allen, along with hundreds of other lives that were lost in the process before Anti-Monitor was defeated.
Number 5, the Frightful Four. Ah, a second group inspired by the Fantastic Four. Yes, the Frightful Four also did not come up with a very clever name. The Wizard, the Sandman, and Paste Pot Pete, who all regularly did battle with the Human Torch and were defeated by him around the same time, realized that they all had unique powers and a mutual disdain for the Fantastic Four. The Wizard suggested that they form a group that would be the evil counterparts to the Fantastic Four. A great idea, but it's just 3 dudes. They need a 4th member to their group, and what do you know, the Wizard had heard of a strange woman hiding out on a remote island on the Mediterranean who had complete control of her hair. Traveling there, the Wizard convinced Madame Medusa to join their ranks. Now this Madame Medusa was actually Medusa of the Inhumans, as some of you may have guessed, but she was kept under the influence of the Wizard using a device that kept her memories forgotten to her. They made their first attack at Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Woman's engagement party, which is kinda just rude if you ask me. Number 4. Wrecking Crew. When Dirk Garthwaite, otherwise known as Wrecker, held onto his enchanted crowbar, he invited his 3 chums, ex-physicist Dr. Elliot Franklin, ex-Army Master Sergeant Henry Camp, and ex-farmhand Brian Kalusky to come and do the same in the middle of a thunderstorm. When lightning struck the crowbar, all 3 men were empowered, becoming Thunderball, Bulldozer, and Piledriver respectively, and coming together to be the villainous Wrecking Crew. These mystical strongmen were mainly an enemy to Thor, but they originally fought against the Defenders. This group has actually been around for a pretty long time and have battled many a superhero. The Fantastic Four, Avengers, Omega Flight, Spider-Man, the Thunderbolts, and even got into a fight between the Marvel and DC universes.
Number 3. Lex Luthor and Brainiac. They were almost a complete success even in their very first team-up. Almost. Together, Lex Luthor and Brainiac appeared in issue 167 of Superman, where they teamed up in a 3-part story to take down their joint foe. Their brilliance and technological know-how combined allowed them to both shrink and depower Superman, but unfortunately for them, Superman would not stand by and let himself be so easily defeated, or so well defeated, because I think that's a pretty good plan. And he found a way to escape their wrath. They honestly should have just squashed him when they had a chance, but hey, then we wouldn't have any more stories. Lex and Brainiac together, in fact, are such a fan favorite. We've even seen them in the most intense kind of team up in the DC animated universe when they merged both their minds and bodies together into one being. Like, you know your partnership is intense when you're just let's just join and be one being, but also terrifying. I don't want to fight. Lex and Brainiac merged together. Number 2, Masters of Evil. Another very iconic and successful group of supervillains who have teamed up together. This roster has also changed dramatically over the years when it comes to their members, and despite the fact that they have some members who are less popular when it comes to their notoriety, this seems to be a team that generally has some measure of success when it comes to their evil plots. The team has consisted of such members as Moonstone, Radioactive Man, Tiger Shark, Titania, and Absorbing Man, with any of the Zemos usually being seen as the most successful leaders of the team to date. But they've also had a lot of different leaders. To date, we've seen multiple incarnations of the team, and we're actually likely in, or at least approaching, the double digits, I think, at this point, when it comes to all the different rosters that we've seen. Number 1, Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn. Yeah, so if you know me, you may have already guessed that they'd be at my top, but yeah, I love Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn. Never mind being, I think, some of the best supervillain team-ups out there. It's just 2 amazing characters. You give me 2 amazing villains together, I'm gonna say that it worked well. These 2 work together in a way that almost allows them to move from the side of villain to hero. In fact, over the last few years, as we've seen their characters develop together, they have both become more and more heroic. Though Ivy is now, of course, kind of headed back in the direction of straight up villain, currently in the comics, after her and Harley's relationship kind of fell apart in the aftermath of Heroes in Crisis. Still, for the most part, these 2 have brought out a lot of the best in each other, and have also managed to pull off some pretty impressive schemes along the way. I don't know whether making each other better and bringing out the hero in each other means that these 2 should be considered a great or an awful supervillain team up, but I personally like to see that as a win, even if it doesn't align with the villainous focus of this list. Any partnership where you bring out the best in someone, for good or for evil, should be considered one of the greatest in my books, because that's what partnerships and or relationships are all about.
10. Batman Holy Terror. A one-shot published in 1991, Batman Holy Terror was the first graphic novel to ever bear the Elseworlds logo. It takes place in an alternate timeline where the US is a Commonwealth nation ruled by a corrupt theocratic government. In it, Bruce Wayne, 22 years after the death of his parents, plans on joining the clergy, until James Gordon informs him of the truth behind his parents' death. It wasn't a random mugging, but rather a state-planned execution. It's revealed that the government brainwashes and tortures people, especially those who are anti-government radicals. Thomas Wayne was one of those radicals, a physician who attempted to treat those who had undergone experiments, aversion therapy, had been impregnated due to experiments, you name it. Bruce decides to start a crusade, hunting down the people responsible for his parents' assassinations. He becomes a priest, dons a costume that his father once wore in a play, and ends up discovering that the highest court of government, the Star Chamber, are the ones to blame. They have testing facilities in which characters like Barry Allen are forced into experiments that tamper with splicing their genes. He also stumbles upon the corpse of Superman, known as Project Green Man, an alien child that was found in Kansas who was raised and studied by the state. The older he got, the more difficult it was for the government to control him, so they killed him using an irradiated rock found in his spaceship. All in all, it's a pretty dark graphic novel. And at number 9, Superman the Feral Man of Steel. The Feral Man of Steel is an Elseworlds one-shot published in 1994 that puts Kal-El in the 19th century, having him raised by wolves. So yeah, you probably guessed it, it's a story that is loosely based on the Mowgli series, with aspects of Tarzan peppered in. Superman's ship crashes into a jungle in India, and the baby Kal-El is saved by a pack of Indian wolves from a Bengal tiger. As the boy grows, he develops powers along with a new power that allows him to communicate with animals. Lois Lane is later brought into the narrative, falling in love with him, and Lex Luthor also makes an appearance as a power-hungry explorer in search of fame and riches. He's got mutton chops and a full head of hair too, which is pretty great. He ends up taking Kal-El to England and attempts to force the Feral Man of Steel to assassinate Queen Victoria, using a kryptonite jewel to attempt to manipulate him. And at number 8, JLA the Nail. JLA the Nail is seen as one of the best Elseworlds series to date. Published in 1998, its story surrounded a parallel universe in which the Kent's truck hits a nail in the road, giving them a flat tire and ultimately starting a domino effect in which they aren't the ones to discover Kal-El. Superman is non-existent in this world, and flash forward to the future, the Justice League still does exist, but sans the Man of Steel. But because of the lack of his presence, there's a whole lot of other difficult factors in play for our remaining heroes. Perry White and Metropolis Mayor Lex Luthor conduct an anti-metahuman propaganda campaign. Hawkman dies after a battle with a Mazo. Green Arrow becomes a paraplegic with a bitter taste towards the JLA. Metahumans begin to get captured and eliminated one by one, starting with villains but eventually moving on to the Doom Patrol and the Outsiders. The Joker liberates Arkham Asylum, kills Robin and Batgirl, and then traps Batman. Catwoman manages to save him, but in the process, the Joker commits suicide, which looks like a murder, ultimately tarnishing the JLA's reputation. Things only accelerate from there, so you should definitely check out The Nail. Moving on to another famous Elseworlds title, in at 7, Kingdom Come. Created by Mark Waid and Alex Ross, this 1996 4-issue miniseries is a deconstructionist tale set in an alternate future in which the world of superheroes has been divided into two types: visibly out-of-touch heroes and a growing population of reckless, irresponsible, and amoral vigilantes, many of which are the offspring of the traditional superheroes. Batman is stuck in the middle, desperately trying to damage control the escalating situation. It's a story that has been considered Ross's grand opus about the characters of DC and has been compared to the likes of Watchmen and Alan Moore's Twilight of the Superheroes, the writer's infamous lost work. The traditional superheroes of the Justice League end up abandoning their positions and duties when a new superhero by the name of Magog rises up, who kills the Joker while the villain is on his way to a trial for the mass murders of the staff at the Daily Planet. After Magog ends up accidentally killing millions in the American Midwest and destroying a huge amount of the country's food produce resources, Wonder Woman convinces Superman to return to Metropolis and reform the JLA. Of course, Batman has some beef with his best pal, resenting him for walking away 10 years ago and letting the world become what it has. And he insists his old methods won't work with this new generation of heroes. And that's just the first chunk of the story. It gets more intense from there. And at number 6, Wonder Woman Amazonia. From 1997, this one-shot takes place between the years of 1888 and 1928, in a steampunk alternate reality after a mysterious explosion killed Queen Victoria and her entire immediate family. An American man called Jack Planters appears with a claim to be a distant relative and is crowned king. Turns out he is responsible for the death of the royal family, and under his rule the British Empire becomes more militaristic, declaring war on France. And it's super misogynistic, suspending all the rights of women within this newly established and harsh patriarchy. So now is where Wonder Woman comes in. Steve Trevor, a villain in this reality, comes to Paradise Island and kidnaps Diana, forcing her to marry him. She ends up becoming a theater star in London, but eventually takes on the Wonder Woman persona, organizing a resistance against King Jack.
Number 5, Red Rain. Red Rain has to be one of my all-time favorite Elseworlds tales. It also was an ongoing story that was told over the course of multiple graphic novels released throughout the 90s. In this story, Batman battles vampires but eventually succumbs to them when he is bitten and transformed himself into one of the creatures of the night. He still battles with his new monstrous nature, however, attempting to rebel against it. However, eventually the Joker pushes him too far, causing him to give into temptation and drink his foe's blood. I also like how this is rebel. This is like, get off my lawn, kids. I don't know why I do this when I say rebel. Batman attempts to make sure the Joker will never rise again as a vampire, but eventually it is revealed that he was somehow unsuccessful in preventing this from happening when we revisit this alternate Earth much later down the road. Fans of vampires are sure to also enjoy this world, but as a Batman fan, I also just love the extra layer of moral struggle that vampirism gives Batman.
And at number 4, Superman Red Sun. What if Superman was raised in the Soviet Union? That's the question this Elseworlds comic aims to answer. Nominated for an Eisner Award and a recipient of a ton of other acclaim, this 3-issue limited series is set in an alternate reality in which Superman's rocket ship lands in the Ukraine, all thanks to his ship departing a little later than it did in the Prime timeline, with the Earth's rotation changing the location in which it landed. Superman becomes the Soviet Union's champion of the common worker, fighting a never-ending battle for Stalin and socialism. But because of this, he ends up becoming a bit of a tyrant. Lex Luthor, a scientist employed by Star Labs, is hired by the CIA to destroy Superman in the midst of the Cold War. He later becomes the president of the USA. Meanwhile, Batman is in this universe working as the Resistance leader against Superman. He is later killed but becomes a martyr, with a resistance group called the Batmen wearing copycats of his costume carrying on the cause. Moving on to number 3, Gotham by Gaslight. This one-shot released in 1989 is set in the 19th century, and follows Bruce Wayne's origin story of becoming Batman during the rise of Jack the Ripper's reign of terror in Gotham City. It's technically the first Elseworlds story, despite not being labeled as such, with it later being given the imprint. Now the story begins in 1889 with Bruce Wayne studying under Freud. After analyzing a reoccurring dream where he recalls his parents' murder, he decides to go back to Gotham City. When in Gotham, Inspector Gordon shows Bruce the case files behind a man who poisoned his wife and tried to commit suicide, leaving him with a permanent grin. Wonder who that's inspired by. Bruce takes up the Batman mantle, and just as he does, Jack the Ripper comes to the city, commits a series of murders that some people actually blame on Batman, but eventually Batman and the Ripper come face to face as Bruce interrupts him, during one of his murders that is. It's revealed that the man behind the Ripper is actually an acquaintance of Bruce's, Jacob Parker, who's been going around killing women who reminded him of Bruce's mother, whom he was in love with and was rejected by. Parker was the one responsible for hiring an assassin to kill his parents. Moving on to number 2, Superman Speeding Bullets. Another one-shot on our list, Speeding Bullets was released in 1993, and explores the life of a superhero who is the amalgamation of Batman and Superman. Kal-El is sent to Earth and is found by Thomas and Martha Wayne, who name him Bruce. The Waynes one night are gunned down by a mugger, and Bruce uses his heat vision to kill the mugger. Flash forward several years later, Bruce has become a recluse. That rhymes. Living inside of Wayne Manor, but his super hearing allows him to hear all of the cries of those in Gotham. One night, when armed robbers break into the house and take Alfred hostage, he uses his superpowers and attacks them. That's when Alfred takes Bruce down into a cave below the mansion to show him his rocket ship, to teach him where he came from. Bruce dons the mantle of Batman and begins his crusade in Gotham. The rest of the story finds Bruce facing off against Lex Luthor. It begins to take the shape as an amalgamation of himself and the Joker after an accident leaves him disfigured, and later Bruce ends up adopting the Superman persona.
And coming in at number 10 is the Psycho Rangers. Now I was about to put the Space Rangers here, but then I remembered the Psycho Rangers. The evil princess Astronema created this group of evil rangers to draw on the power of her master, Dark Spectre, and they were designed specifically to hunt down the Power Rangers. Each Psycho Ranger had a specific fighting style unbeatable by the ranger that they were the evil version of, and they were even a serious threat to the Ranger team even without all of their members. The Psycho Rangers were used by Astronema not only to defeat the Power Rangers but also to severely weaken Dark Spectre, whom Astronema was trying to overthrow. But then, these guys even got monster forms that they turned into if their ranger forms were actually destroyed. They have an embedded second wind perk. That's so cool! The Space Rangers had to team up with the Galaxy Rangers to even take out a powered up version of these guys, and it was still a close fight. In the comics, we get to see the origin of the very first Psycho Ranger, Psycho Green, who was actually the Green Supersonic Ranger before he turned, and he served as the right-hand man for the Dark Spectre himself. Number 9, the the Omega Rangers. The Omega Rangers were a small but ancient faction or team that are specifically around to operate in the most dangerous and most remote areas of space, and they're powered by the classical elements of fire, water, earth, and air. Now originally the team was around many millennia ago on the Morphin Master's homeworld of Safe Haven, and they were originally composed of Bledsoe, the Red Fire Ranger, Apophy, the Black Air Ranger, the Purim, Yellow Earth Ranger, Haza, the Blue Water Ranger, and Spark, the Gold Sun Ranger. But Spark turned on his fellow Rangers, being taken over by the possibilities of having death-defying powers. And he became the Death Ranger, which, if you've seen our most powerful Ranger video, which you should, is one of the most powerful Rangers out there, even if he's evil. Despite that, the Omega Rangers were able to stop and imprison Spark, and they were also really cool. I really like them, and they're only in the comics, so check them out. Number 8, the Aquitar Rangers. During the 3rd season of Mighty Morphin's Power Rangers, these aliens who come from Aquitons filled in for Earth's original team of Rangers when they were turned into children. And in terms of power, they appeared at least to be equal to Zordon's team, which is absolutely saying something. The other thing is that with a unique group of powers and really cool powerful Zords, this team was able to adequately fill in the gap left by Earth's out of commission forces, proving that they were exceptional in their own right, and a team to be reckoned with, particularly when considering how dangerous Rita Repulsa, Zed, and Master Vile were. They held their own, and they came back to reappear in the comics, which was super cool to see. Also, they were the first team that came into Power Rangers lore that showed that the Rangers were not just contained to Earth. They basically opened up the whole Power Rangers universe, and that's too cool for school right there. If you guys are enjoying this list, or me as a host, or the overall vibe here, make sure to check out and subscribe to Top 10 Nerd. It's all just more of the same stuff for nerds like you and us.
Number 7, Great Ring of Arakko. The Great Ring of Arakko is exclusively made up of Omega level mutants, which really tells you how much of a powerhouse team they would be. They are the ruling body of Arakko, which is the sister mutant island nation to Krakoa. In fact, Arakko and Krakoa are kind of like less siblings and more romantically tied. Ooh, romantic islands that are in love with each other. Both are sentient mutant islands, and for a long time they were actually attached to one another, literally and romantically, and were also in love with each other. Although now, they actually prefer to be separate. They've been separate for a long time, and they're like, you know what? The spark, it's gone. Arakko's ruling government has 4 distinct sections, which govern different parts of their civilization, with some areas having more power at given times. For example, in war times, Dawn is the area that typically gets more say, as this is the area that Dawn rules over and governs. The war times. For years, the Araki were at war with Amenth, so this would have been a very prominent section for many years in the past in terms of their ruling body. And it's something that the mutants of Arakko struggle with releasing themselves from, the obligation to always be on guard and kinda always be at war with people. While Uranos recently cleaned the clock of the Great Ring of Arakko, that should not undermine their strength, as Uranos is basically on a whole other level by himself as one of the most powerful, ruthless, and I would say evil Eternals that we've ever seen. And I know people would probably like put the X-Men above the Eternals or mutants above Eternals, but let me tell you, the Eternals are still pretty powerful, so we gotta respect. Number 6, versus Inhumans Unity Team. Inhumans versus X-Men was an interesting time, to say the least. We basically had to come up with a reason for these two groups to fight one another, which we did by making the mutants deathly allergic to Terrigen Mists, which had actually been released around the world, which ended up killing, you know, a lot of mutants. As a result, Emma Frost made a martyr out of Cyclops, using him to propel forward her own plot to eliminate the threat of the Inhumans. She ended up being one of the main leaders of this team, which was sort of a unity squad, bringing together all mutant-related X teams, primarily Magneto's X-Men, an X-Men team with past versions of the characters, and a more current X-Men team, in addition to some other mutants who have served on X-Men teams before. Number 4, the Five. The Five have to be one of my favorite teams to this day. They also in essence stand to represent this current era of X-Men, which seems sadly finally be coming to a close. Oh no, I'm going to be so sad to see it end. I'm not ready to say goodbye. I'm gonna need a box of tissues whenever if we do a video about that. Oh gosh, I'm gonna be crying the whole time. The 5 are iconic in this way because they represent the power mutant kind now holds. The power over life and death. Mutants can resurrect other mutants, and not just that, they can resurrect other people as well, as it turns out, non-mutant people. So they don't just decide who lives and dies in regards to other mutants, but can also pass this judgment on to all the people of Earth. The 5 are the team that allows this to happen. They're led by Hope Summers, and the roster includes Egg, Proteus, Tempest, and Elixir. Together, these 5 teammates can resurrect mutants by creating eggs and imbuing those eggs with life, growing clones of mutants who have died, and using their powers to not just recreate them physically, but also to recreate them on a genetic level, giving them back their powers and even modifying them to be as they were in real life. For example, Wolverine having his adamantium-coated skeleton, which is not part of his powers, but something he got later in life, they can do that and also give him those sweet adamantium claws. In addition, the 5 also use backups Professor X keeps on Cerebro for all mutants to restore their memories as well, so that they are in essence the same person who died recently. Although the question of what this means for their soul is still something that I think we're considering, and I wonder if that will have repercussions after we end this era. Who hasn't died? That's gonna be the real question. Who hasn't died yet? We should do a list on that.
Number 3, Ranger Sentries. I feel as though some people are gonna hate this being put here because they aren't really technically a team. They're more like an army. The Ranger Sentries were essentially an army created by a corrupted and evil version of Tommy Oliver, the infamous and insanely powerful Lord Drakon. In the world of the coinless and alternate reality, Drakon created a whole army of humans who wore mass-produced Ranger armor. The Mastodon Sentries and their super cool black and white costumes acted as like the police force and the bulk of the army in this world. The pink Pterodactyl Sentries were the long-range sniper infantry and support for the Mastodons. The green Zeo Sentries were the mobile infantry, and they also had these awesome tank mechs. It was so cool. The Silver Space Sentries were the air support, and they had sweet jetpacks, and everybody loves jetpacks, and energy blasters, so obviously super cool. Then we had the Jungle Fury Rhino Sentries, who were essentially tanks, not like the awesome mechs, but like these big hulking strong guys in massive armor. So cool. There were the Blue Samurai Sentries, and they seemed to be like the melee foot soldiers. As a force of them with the Mastodon Sentries invaded the city of Corinth. We also got these awesome dino-charged gold sentries who had these massive shields and like super heavy firepower. They would make up like the shield wall, and they were just so dope. Next up would be the Sabertooth sentries, who were like the yellow ones, and these seem to act as lieutenants. I don't know. I think that's what they do. It wasn't really clear what they do, but they're a step under the Tyrannosaurus sentries, who are the Red Rangers of the army. And these guys serve as the personal elite guard of Lord Drakon and the other evil forces like Rita Repulsa and Scorpina. That was a lot, I know, but as you might have picked up, each of these class of soldier were based on a ranger from across the Power Rangers universe after Drakon went through and took the morphers from at least one of every team. Powerful? Absolutely. A team? That's up to you guys to decide, but I'm gonna say yes. Definitely a team. Just a big team. An army, some could say. Number 2, Time Force Rangers. Coming from the year 3000, the technology available to this team of Rangers almost automatically outmatches any of the other man-made Ranger powers in existence, as does their futuristic military-like training. But, I mean, let's be honest. The most obvious show of power here is their ability to travel through frickin' time. Theoretically, if they broke their oath about ethical time travel, which is boring, nearly any adversary they came up against could be thwarted before they ever rose to power in the first place, or before they were even born. Obviously, though, if they messed up, they could ultimately threaten the time-space continuum, so that's pretty bad, and they'll most likely stick to the rules, but still. The Time Force Rangers were an extremely strong group. Each Ranger's character had a strong sense of conviction to boot, especially Jen, their leader. And the Quantum Ranger? He made our list of most powerful Rangers for a reason. Also, again, they literally travel through time. That's kind of the main thing here. Time travel is super powerful. And in at number 1, it's the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I'm sorry. They fought and teamed up with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Godzilla, not to mention the Justice League. This group of teenagers with attitude went up against the Witch, Rita Repulsa, the head of an evil empire, Lord Zed, and even Rita's father, Master Vile. All villains who had enormous armies, resources, and raw magical power. As some of the most skilled fighters in the franchise, the MMPR team would jump headfirst into hand-to-hand combat. They had a slew of ever-developing and exponentially more powerful Zords and weapons to summon if the battle called for it. But best of all, if the Rangers were forced to retreat, their tremendous resourcefulness would kick in as they worked together to develop a solution, innovate new technology, or just go grab like a long-lost artifact to use, creating a strength where there was once a weakness. So, like, while other teams may have had better power sources and all that fun, fancy, extra stuff, this team always found a way to adapt, kind of like Batman. But they also have the most experienced group of Rangers, especially when we take their comic book counterparts into consideration. Jason Lee Scott, Zach Taylor, Billy Cranston, Trini Kwan, Kimberly Ann Hart, and of course, they had Tommy Oliver.
Number 10, Gamma Corps. Not to be confused with Gamma Flight, the space program, or the other Gamma Flight, Alpha Flight training team. The Gamma Corps are actually made up of various different Gamma mutates, who basically were initially brought together to be used in hunting down the Hulk, believing him to be responsible for their fates and their mutations. They later learned, however, the truth and ended up turning on the Illuminati as a result. Team members included General Riker, their initial leader, Timothy Wilkerson, known as Prodigy, Gray, Griffin, Mr. Gideon, and Mess. While they were rescued by the Hulk from a Hulk AI and later depowered, I would say that at their height they could stand a chance against a more classic Avengers roster. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by giving us a thumbs up? Number 9, Thunderbolts. The Thunderbolts might not be as good at teamwork in some cases, but they are definitely more interesting than the Avengers when it comes to their story, and despite being initially made up secretly of a group of villains led by Baron Zemo, the public even came to accept them as heroes. Over the years, their lineup has changed dramatically, and currently they are actually more of a mishmash of like less heroic folks and more heroic folks, although the fact remains that the Thunderbolts has always remained a more heroic, at least at heart, or at least anti-hero based team. One of their current members also happens to be Spectrum, aka Monica Rambeau, who is known for packing a punch. Number 8, Titans 3. Titans 3 is a group that is similar but different to another one I had on part 1 of my list. It is basically the Defenders, sort of, but also may predate the Defenders, I believe, in terms of their appearance. The Titans 3 only appeared in a couple of issues of Submariner back in the 70s, making their first appearance in issue number 34 and their last in issue number 35. This team was led by Namor the Submariner and was brought together to save the world, as many great superhero teams have been brought together in the past. Joining Namor were the Hulk and the Silver Surfer, so no Doctor Strange here, but still a very powerful team I think, even with only 3 of them.
Coming in number 7, SPD. This might be a bit controversial, I'm not too sure. Some people don't like this, some people do. Power Rangers SPD was just a tiny part of Space Patrol Delta, basically an interplanetary police force that has jurisdiction over the whole galaxy. With that kind of a concept, they get points in the power scales for sure. They rely on an impressive amount of highly advanced technology to bring peace and order to the galaxy. For example, giant, exaggerated police vehicles. Super cool. What's really interesting though is that although major conflicts existed between the characters themselves, like between Jack and Sky, the team still pulled together and became strong enough to juggle multiple intergalactic threats throughout the series. Also, Doggy Kruger as the Shadow Ranger was strong enough to make up for almost any shortcomings the team might have had. And I haven't even touched on the fact that all the members of the B Squad in Power Rangers SPD, so the ones we actually focus on in the show and the comic, have a set of superpowers that they even continue to possess without their Rangers forms. They may not have been able to show their full potential in the show, but they sure as hell put up a hell of a fight. And also, definitely my favorite season of Power Rangers. That's just me. Number 6, Zeo. They derive their powers from a magic crystal whose power keeps magnifying over time. so that kind of automatically ranks them among the strongest. Theoretically speaking, the Rangers could have relied on the power of the Zeo Crystal to defend Earth for like basically forever, and it would just get stronger and stronger as they went on. But to get real here for a sec, production issues with the actual show meant they kind of had to switch to this weird car style, and it kind of brought everything just down a little bit. But despite that fact, the Zeo Rangers are one of the strongest Ranger teams in existence because of their firepower. They had a huge array of new, interesting, and absolutely wacky and weird Zords that could fend off massive attacks orchestrated by the Machine Empire, which itself was one of the strongest set of villains any Power Ranger team has faced ever. Number 5, the Super Megaforce. Also a controversial team. But with a name like that, how can they not be powerful? Now before I trigger you Ranger lovers out there, yes, I know the show of this team kinda sucked. They didn't really get individuality, but the comics fleshed them out a bit more, and I mean, their concept? Super Megaforce is one of the strongest teams in Ranger history. A team of Rangers that is completely backed up by all the past Rangers' powers in the history of the franchise, including a few we've never seen or heard of before, especially in the comics with the energy manipulating Squadron Rangers. And they even got Zordon's own apprentice as their mentor. How can they not be strong? They're more of an homage to every other team of Rangers, but because of that, they get points for nostalgia on top of their combined power. Coming in number 4 is Mystic Force. Magic. That's all I gotta say. No, I'm kidding. But Mystic Force is technically one of the most powerful Rangers teams ever. Their powers come directly from the Xenotome and ancient elemental magic, and not a lot of teams can say that. These Rangers cast incredibly powerful spells left and right. They wielded the power of really awesome Zords and had what might be the fanciest looking power-ups in Ranger canon with Legend Mode. But then their Red Ranger, Nick, he is amongst the most powerful Red Rangers around, but doesn't hold a candle to his dad, Lianbo, the Wolf Warrior, who also joined the team. Also, capes. They have frickin' capes, and that's really cool. Who else has capes? I don't have a cape. I wish I had a cape. I need a cape. Anyways.
Number 2, Nova Corps. When you think about it, the Nova Corps, despite having been destroyed by the Universal Church of Truth, is probably one of the most powerful organizations or groups likely in the universe. Originally, they were known as Xandar's line of defense, but as they grew, they ended up expanding the area under their protection, eventually extending to the whole of the Andromeda Galaxy, and I mean at least part of the Milky Way, as Earth also fell under their jurisdiction, where they, decided to take it under their wing. And while yes, as of Annihilation Scourge, they may be gone right now, with only Richard Rider as Nova surviving, it's more than likely that we will eventually see them return in the comics at some point. And usually when we do, I mean, they're just really powerful, so we should acknowledge that. Number 10, X-Statix. X-Statix was a team created to be a replacement for the original X-Force after they seemingly sacrificed themselves. The team was founded by Spike Freeman, who wanted to have a public mutant team backed by the government. Even the original roster of X-Statix would quickly become casualties, despite being a newly formed team. Coach originally was the team leader, but X-Statix would eventually rebel against his leadership, because he was kind of a jerk, to be honest, with members acting on behalf of their own motivations instead, and doing what they thought was best. X-Statix has had many different members over the years, as many of them died during their time serving on the team, which is kind of the whole joke of X-Statix. The roster has featured such members as Mr. Sensitive, Zeitgeist, Anarchist, Spike Freeman, Coach, Dead Girl, Dupe, You Go Girl, Gone Girl, Fatty, Rosa Lemper, The A, Vivisector, Bloke, El Guapo, Gin Genie, and Venus D. Milo, among others. Because like I said, a lot of them don't last very long. Number 8, Nasty Boys. The Nasty Boys have to be one of my favorite lesser known villain groups of all time. So I cannot pass up an opportunity to mention how awesome and how powerful they are. The Nasty Boys were Mr. Sinister's group of henchmen following his Marauders group. The field leader for the team is Ruckus, whose mutant power allows him to absorb sound around him and use his vocal cords to project it back out as a powerful concussive sound-based blast. past. Initially, the Nasty Boys were used in a plot to kill the Scarlet Witch, and later on in a plot to kill Malice. Their roster has included such members as One Man Team, Multiple Man, Hairbag, Ramrod, Gorgeous George, and of course, Slab. Number 7, Star Masters. Probably not a team you get to hear about often, I'd think, on YouTube, so let me get you up to speed here. Star Masters were brought together by the accusation that Quasar was guilty of murder, having believed to have massacred basically a bunch of people on a starship. Those that made up the team were the ones who believed him to be innocent. I also just love Wendell Vaughn and feel like we don't really get to talk about him too much on the channel for how powerful he is. Probably because Wendell, aka Quasar, isn't super prominent in the comics anymore these days, especially not Wendell as Quasar, because now we also have Avril. However, Wendell has appeared in the Guardians of the Galaxy series in recent years. While Quasar was obviously on the team, so was Beta Ray Bill, Silver Surfer, Morphex, and Zenith. After Quasar was proven innocent, the team became more focused on maintaining peace throughout the cosmos. Basically, like OP cosmic peacekeepers, which I also just love as a team idea. Number 6, Transformers. Well, it's weird to think of the Transformers as a Marvel team, since, you know, they are with Hasbro. Marvel also happens to be the place where they kind of got their comic book start. And recently, IDW did lose the rights to the comics for Transformers. Although it's lucky for Marvel, and I do love their work, it is a little sad because I was also actually interested in the IDW Transformers stuff, which I guess I could go back and read. Or well, I guess they can't reprint it, so I'd have to find old stuff. Oh well. I'm sure there's still lots of awesome stuff in store in the future for Transformers comics, no matter who the rights belong to, because they're just a really cool property. And either way, the team will remain unstoppable. I'm still waiting for an Avengers vs Transformers event, so hopefully that is something we could also see in the future. Number 5, Multiversal Masters of Evil. The Multiversal Masters of Evil were actually powerful enough to defeat the Avengers. So this one, actually the proof is in the pudding in this case. The Multiversal Masters of Evil were actually powerful enough to defeat the Avengers, or rather the Avengers of 1 million BC, aka the prehistoric Avengers, but still, even when they went back in the day, the first Avengers were still some of the most powerful people on or off the planet of Earth. So I feel like that's still really impressive. I know before, in part 1, some people in the comments wanted to know which Avengers team we were comparing these other teams to. We're like, how can you compare them if you're not telling us the parameters, Amanda? Well, you know, I don't really have a lot of time to go through the parameters, but what I will say is I'm more thinking of these teams in comparisons generally speaking. So meaning any and all versions of the team can really be contrasted to each other. No specific parameters per se, although I am leaning more towards like classic Avengers, I guess when I'm thinking of it. These are more teams that would just be considered more powerful than at least one of the Avengers rosters. And we already know the Multiversal Masters of Evil succeeded there because they already beat the prehistoric Avengers. The Multiversal Masters of Evil are different from the standard team, and they actually include Doom Supreme, King Killmonger, Black Skull, Dark Phoenix, Ghost Goblin, and Kid Thanos. Number 4, Squadron Supreme. Squadron Supreme is kind of like Marvel's version of the Justice League. And I know what you're thinking, but wait a minute, Amanda. I thought the Avengers was like Marvel's version of the Justice League. Well, yes and no. The Avengers team doesn't really have powerhouses in the same way as the Justice League does, and Squadron Supreme kind of does that a little bit better than the Avengers does, if we're comparing. Marvel even went so far as to rename the alternate reality version of them that also appeared in 2021's Heroes Reborn event the Squadron Supreme of America. Get it? Like the Justice League of America. Their ranks typically include Nighthawk, Dr. Spectrum, Blur, Hyperion, and Warrior Woman or Princess Power, whatever name she's going by, aka Zarda Shelton. She goes by both, depending on which version of her we're talking about. Number 3, X-Terminators. Another secret powerhouse team that is one of my all-time favorites, and which I don't think we give enough love to on this channel, is the X-Terminators. This team was primarily made up of young mutants who were saved by the earlier incarnation of the X-Factor team, back when that was a government-funded team and was kind of like the X-Men, the old X-Men reformed again. Standout members for Exterminators throughout the years have included Rusty Collins, aka Fire Fist, made popular by his very different but memorable appearance and adaptation in the Deadpool film franchise, Cable, Boom Boom, Richter, Whiz Kid, Lila Cheney, Cannonball, and of course, in the more recent team roster, Korra of the Burning Heart from Morocco, who is also so cool. The Exterminators first appeared in the 80s in their own self-titled series. Number 2, the Sisterhood. One of my favorite lesser known but immensely powerful teams in the Marvel Universe is the Sisterhood, also known as the Sisterhood of Mutants. Part of the reason why they're referred to as just the Sisterhood though, is that technically not all of their members are mutants, so don't be confused by the name. However, all of their members have been women who are or have generally been acknowledged as supervillains, though not all of them even are supervillains, so yeah. The team was founded and led originally by Madeline Pryor. Throughout the years, members have included Lady Deathstrike, Celine Gallio, aka the Black Queen, Typhoid Mary, Lady Mastermind, the other female mastermind named Martinique, Psylocke, Quanon, Spiral, Enchantress, and Brightco. Number 1. God Squad. The God Squad is about as powerful as they sound, but still, they remain one of the lesser known teams in the Marvel Universe. I was kinda hoping we'd get like a God Squad reference in Thor Love and Thunder, but sadly, no God Squad. Maybe that was one of the things that got cut, who knows. The team was originally assembled by the Council of Godheads and first came together during the events of Secret Invasion. The team first formed in the Incredible Hercules issue 117 in 2008. The original roster included Adam the Demogorgon, Snowbird, the Eternal Ajax, and Amatsu Mikaboshi, later known as the Chaos King. The roster would go on to include such impressive members as Silver Surfer, Galactus, Circe, also of the Eternals, Thor, Amadeus Cho, and of course, Hercules himself. Number 10. X-Force. X-Force is known for being one of the most ruthless mutant and X-Men related teams in the comics. It was initially more Cable's team and was used like a sort of time police force to remove threats to the timeline. However, as time went on, the name became repurposed and is now more associated with someone like Wolverine, known for being a sort of mutant black ops team, usually that he leads. Currently, Krakoa is equivalent to America's CIA, and in fact very currently, as of right now in 2022 at the time of this recording, the team is more Hank McCoy, Beast's team, which has recently moved out of the shadows, with Beast deciding to no longer basically hide all the morally questionable, super shady decisions that he's been making to eliminate threats and keep Krakoa safe. Although sometimes it seems like his true aim may actually be something more sinister, because it is an interesting way of trying to keep people safe. And friends, before I move on to my next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and you love the X-Men, then we have a playlist for you. It's our X-Men playlist. Go check it out and you can watch all the X-Men content that we've done. We've done a lot. Number 8. Avengers Unity Division. The Avengers Unity Division is basically a combination of X-Men and Avengers, which makes it pretty OP. At least it was a combination of both these teams when it first started. The team was created by Captain America as a result of the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline. After the fallout, Cap felt pretty bad about basically not really helping the mutants more in regards to promoting them towards humanity and making sure that the world over did not really hate and fear mutants. At least, he felt as responsible as he, as one man, could do. But he's a pretty influential guy, so he was like, maybe I should have been helping you guys more. In an effort to do this now, he decided to bring together Avengers and X-Men to work together, creating the Avengers Unity Division. Later on, Inhumans would even be added into the mix as well, so really this team is all about bringing people from different worlds who maybe don't always see eye to eye together, which is a really beautiful sentiment when you think of it. On the initial team, which was known editorially as Uncanny Avengers, we had Captain America leading and joined by Havoc, Thor, Rogue, Scarlet Witch, and Wolverine. Rogue and Scarlet Witch were an especially challenging combination of characters to have on this team, as Rogue vehemently hated Wanda for what she had done to mutants during House of M, and saw her basically as a villain. In fact, most mutants did at that time, so this was in general a powerful team on paper, but one that also came with a lot of issues and a lot of baggage, to be honest. Of course, that's what makes it so interesting to read, right? We're here for the drama. Number 7. Power Pack. The Power Pack is a team who many see as being less powerful or strong because, well, they started out as kids. But we've seen from looking into the future the potential for this team and its members when it comes to their power levels. And just because it's a younger team, it doesn't mean that they don't deserve your respect and don't deserve to be hyped, especially since they were created in part by one of the Marvel greats, Louise Simonson. The Power Pack first appeared in their own series in Power Pack issue number 1 in 1984 and were created by Simonson, June Brigman, and Bob Vycek. The team members include the Power Siblings, Alex aka Zero G, Katie aka Energizer, Julie aka Light Speed, and Jack aka Mass Master, and have also featured Lord Kofi Whiteman, cousin to the Aelfire Whiteman, who first bestowed powers on the Power Siblings, and of course Franklin Richards, who was also on the team for a little bit. Number 6. Hellions. I feel like this is a list that really was made for me specifically to talk about because I just love gushing over teams and and characters who are lesser known but still are so amazingly strong and deserve to be acknowledged. Case in point, the Hellions. The Hellions is a team that originally started out as Emma Frost's own mutant team and more recently was given over to Mr. Sinister to manage in terms of the team title. Technically, these are kind of like two different Hellions teams, but I like to acknowledge all the history of a team name because I think that's important. Just like we have two Marauders that are quite different, but the Marauders' name is still connected to both, if that makes sense to you. On Krakoa, Sinister's Hellions was made up of the more volatile mutants on the island and was intended to act as sort of a rehabilitation group for them, where they could work out their frustrations via less desirable or perhaps marketable missions. The most recent roster included Psylocke, aka Quanon, Nanny, Orphan Maker, Grey Crow, Empath, Wildchild, and Havoc. And honestly, I miss them so much. Please bring the Hellions back. It ended really sadly, and they deserve better. Number 5. Agents of Atlas. Agents of Atlas is another team that really deserves more love and respect just based on its leaders and its roster. It's filled with powerhouses, whether we're talking about the original team or the Asia-based team, and currently the leader of this team I believe is Jimmy Woo, my guy. I love Jimmy Woo in the MCU and in the comics. The character has actually been around since the 1950s, so yeah, been around for a while. Members for Agents of Atlas have included Shang-Chi, Miss Marvel, Namora, Venus, Uranian, who was once known as Marvel Boy, Arrow, Io, Giant Man, White Fox, Swordmaster, and Silk. Number 3. Extinction. The Extinction team truly is a scary one. They were around at a time when the Phoenix Force was believed to be returning to Earth. It was thought that the Phoenix Force wanted to merge with mutant messiah Hope Summers and have her act as its host. While the X-Men were more optimistic about the Phoenix's return, the Avengers were not so optimistic. As a result, the mutants deployed their own team to fight against the Avengers, but which was initially also created to defend the mutant island of Utopia and, honestly, the world against extinction level threats. Hence the name, the Extinction Team, you know what I mean? The Extinction Team included Cyclops, Magneto, Namor, Storm, Dagger, Magic, Hope Summers, Emma Frost, and Colossus. Talk about a powerhouse lineup. Never mind the Phoenix Force, this team in and of itself seems frightening enough to justify the Avengers' concern, assuming they don't trust the mutants having power, which, while at times both teams have been allied, has always seemed to remain a bit of a touchy subject to the Avengers, who have a history of not playing well with other major superhero teams in the Marvel Universe, to be honest. In fact, they also even have a history of not playing well with each other within their own team. So yeah, me just throwing shade at the Avengers. Number 2, the Phoenix 5. 5 seems to be a magic number when it comes to the mutants. While the 5, as they are simply known, are all about life and resurrection, the Phoenix 5 have the potential to just straight up destroy worlds. Or I suppose they could also save them, if they can avoid being corrupted by the Phoenix's power, that is. The Phoenix 5 are what some members of the Extinction Team become after the Phoenix Force arrives on Earth. During a fight with the Avengers, the Phoenix Force is split into 5 pieces when Iron Man attempts to destroy it. These pieces end up merging with 5 hosts, creating the team we know as the Phoenix 5. Of the Extinction Team, Cyclops, Emma Frost, Namor, Magic, and Colossus are the ones who end up as the Phoenix's hosts, dividing the team. While initially the members of the Phoenix 5 attempt to use their newfound power for good, they all end up kinda getting corrupted, with other members also stealing their power until it is all combined into one host, ending with Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. We all know how that went. Professor X ended up as a dead guy. Number 1, X-Men. Obviously, one of the best and most powerful around has to be the X-Men. I mean, come on. Of course I'm gonna pick the X-Men. I mean, is it too obvious? I don't know, but it's true. And I would say we've actually had one of the best X-Men rosters in recent years, with the previous roster that included Jean Grey, Cyclops, Synch, Lara Kinney's Wolverine, Rogue, Polaris, and Sunfire. While the team has had many different rosters throughout the years that have been standout, Jerry Dugan's team was pretty stacked, especially when you consider you have 2 people that can use other people's powers, one of whom can sync with anyone else on the team. And the current team as well is also fairly stacked, especially with Bobby returning to the main X-Men team and him being a pretty unstoppable force as an Omega level mutant. I mean, honestly, I think Iceman, if he was just a team, he could be a one-man team. That's how powerful he is. If we also considered amassing all the X-Men that had ever served to make one giant giant super team, then the X-Men would also definitely be the most powerful, as they've had so many members rotate on and off the team throughout the years. Even the team from the classic era, still being younger too, at the time that is, they're not as young now, were pretty powerful. And then of course there were the 80s and the 90s for X-Men, which also saw a lot of really powerful lineups, to be honest, with Kitty Pryde, Logan's Wolverine, Rogue, Havoc, Polaris, and even powerhouses like Magneto and Rachel Summers joining the team. Rachel Summers herself could also be a one-woman team. Number 10, Arrowverse. Similar to the comics, CW's Arrowverse has also had their own version of the Suicide Squad team. This version was as equally dark as the comic book version, though not quite as twisted. Tara Strong did the voice for the Harley we saw locked up in the show, but was not the actress that we briefly saw in those shots. This team used to be led by Amanda Waller and featured Deadshot, Shrapnel, and Bronze Tiger. No Harley. However, leadership was later taken over by Oliver Queen's partner John Diggle and his wife Lila Michaels, aka Harbinger, with the roster also being changed to feature Jericho, Cupid, and China White. Number 9, Blackest Day. We don't really get to see this version of the Suicide Squad, alas. We just get to hear instead about their tragic fate. In the DC House of Horror comic special, we get a collection of horror stories set in the DC world, and what we can safely assume are alternate spooky universes. Ooh. One story even features an alternate version of famed Squad member Harley Quinn, where she is a ghost who haunts a man and drives him insane, making him kill tons of people, and all the while teasing him. Typical Harley. In the story Blackest Day, a zombie apocalypse has overrun the world, and Harley Quinn and all of the other members of Amanda Waller's Suicide Squad are confirmed dead by John Constantine, who sends a communique to the Justice League Watchtower before himself being overrun by zombies. It turns out that the Justice League themselves have already been overrun, with Flash infecting them with the virus out on the Watchtower. Number 8, Deceased Hope at World's End. While this series is a little more optimistic than most compared to some of the other DC stuff, it features 2 surviving members of the Suicide Squad, the new Suicide Squad, Aerie and Wink. In this alternate universe, the 2 characters are still alive but are faced with the semi-zombie apocalypse whose infection has reached everywhere via the life equation. This is one of those times when flight powers and functional wings like Ares really do come in more handy, even though I usually rag on that ability sometimes. Especially when you have all those unliving just trudging around down there on the ground. Unfortunately, while Aerie and Wink continue to stay safe while searching for Nightshade and Hive in issue number 4 of Hope at World's End, the pair run into an infected Black Adam, who can also fly, of course, and all of the infected population of Kahndaq.
But in at number 7 is the Squadron Sinister. The Squadron Sinister was a whole team of supervillains created by the Grandmaster as basically copies of the Squadron Supreme of Earth 712. He turned people from Prime 616 universe into counterparts of those Squadron members. These were Kenji Abatu, who became Dr. Spectrum, Kyle Richmond, who became Nighthawk, and Jim Sanders, who became Whizzer, aka Speed Demon. But he also created a version of Hyperion out of non-living extra-dimensional matter. Now, if you know anything about this group of heroes, then you know they are essentially a Marvel Comics parody of versions of DC's Justice League. So then, the Grandmaster pitted this very new powerful squadron against the Avengers in a game against Kang the Conqueror in Avengers number 70. And while they were defeated, they put up a hell of a fight, and if it weren't for the fact that they are villains, there's a possibility they could have came out on top in a different turn of events. And at number 6 though is the Crime Syndicate of America. Why talk about the Marvel version of the Evil Justice League when we can just talk about the actual Evil Justice League? I don't believe I ever said we had to talk strictly about Marvel villain teams here. Anyways, no, DC's Earth 3 is home to the Crime Syndicate of America, an evil, power-obsessed, and incredibly powerful version of the Justice League that were even strong enough to almost completely take over the actual Earth Zero of DC Comics. Where the Squadron Sinister has Hyperion, who is basically a poo-poo version of Superman, the Crime Syndicate has an actual kryptonite-addicted Superman who pushes around the moon. But on top of that, they have Deathstorm with the Firestorm Matrix powers, Grid, which is basically Cyborg, Johnny Quick, the homicidal Flash, the cowardly Power Ring, who would probably fall to the Avengers honestly, Superwoman, who while extremely powerful was also extremely manipulative, and obviously Owlman, Thomas Wayne Jr., and his sadistic version of Alfred Pennyworth. I would actually love to see how the Avengers fare against this group of villains, because I think it would be really interesting. Let me know your thoughts down below. And in at number 5 is the Masters of Evil. The Masters of Evil have actually had about 8 different incarnations over their time in Marvel Comics, and because of that, they've had a large handful of powerful members that have gone up against the Avengers, Thunderbolts, and even the Guardians of the Galaxy. The original group was brought together by Baron Heinrich Zemo after he learned that Captain America had returned to the world. He put together a group of the Avengers' various teammates, different villains. So, on this original team, we had Black Knight, Nathan Garrett, Melter, and Radioactive Man, and they chose to attack with Adhesive X, which was basically super glue, which I know how this sounds, but I promise they got way better. Allow me to list some of the other villains that have been a part of the Masters of Evil. We have Enchantress, Executioner, Ultron 5 as the Crimson Cowl, Dr. Octopus, Atlas, Absorbing Man, Bi-Beast, Bloodstone, Firebrand, Hellstrom, Claw, Moonstone, Satanish, Scorcher, Whiplash, Titania, Wonder Man, The Wrecking Crew, and Yellowjacket. And that's just the big names that stand out to me. Of course, these are all in different combinations with varying levels of effectiveness, but if coordinated properly, they have given the Avengers a tough time in the past, and they very likely could do it again. And in at number 4 is the Army of Evil. Is this cheating? Possibly. Do I care? Nope. Get at me, haters. The Army of Evil was essentially Baron Helmut Zemo taking his reformed Masters of Evil and creating an even bigger team of villains, all for the purpose of helping to expand the power and reach of his arch nemesis, Captain America. What? Yes, this wasn't the Captain America we are used to. This was an evil, twisted version of Captain America who was loyal to Hydra thanks to the Red Skull and his use of a sentient cosmic cube named Kobik. And that was only because Marvel decided to make Steve Rogers loyal to Hydra and then realized that no one wanted that. This Army of Evil consisted of Zemo and the current Masters of Evil alongside Absorbing Man, Baron Blood, Blackout, Blue Streak, the Circus of Crime, Count Nefaria, Cyclone, Dragonfly, Pharah, Graviton, Grey Gargoyle, Gypsy Moth, Hobgoblin, Jack-O-Lantern, Kraven the Hunter, Lady Bullseye, Living Laser, Madame Menace, Mr. Hyde, MODOK, Nitro, Regent, Scorcher, Serpent Solutions, Squid, the UFOs, Whirlwind, Wizard, and Yellowjacket, and they were sent to attack Midtown Manhattan to lure out America's superheroes, where Zemo would then use the Darkhold to trap the island in Dark Force.
Number 3, Arkhamverse. Recently, we have gotten another look at the Arkhamverse with the new Suicide Squad game. The Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. The new game was confirmed as being part of the established Arkhamverse and features Suicide Squad members Harley Quinn, King Shark, Captain Boomerang, and Deadshot, taking on one of their darkest missions yet. Amanda Waller has instructed Task Force X this time around to take down the Justice League, which means yeah, somehow this group of misfits is going to have to try and take down heroes like Superman and Wonder Woman. Yikes. Number 2, Assault on Arkham. This animated Batman direct-to-video film, Assault on Arkham, was kind of what I was hoping we'd get when we got the initial Suicide Squad film in terms of plot. This alternate animated version of the team is led by the merciless Amanda Waller, who captures the criminals and forces them to complete missions in order to have years removed from their sentence. They have no say, however, in whether or not they want to be involved, and a skeptical KG Beast even challenges Waller's promise that should they misbehave or deviate from their missions, their heads will be blown off via bombs she had implanted in their necks. No collars this time around. KG Beast learns the hard way that Waller is telling the truth, and after the rest of the team watches KG Beast's head get blown off, they agree to cooperate. Seems like a smart move. Their mission is to break into Arkham and recover a piece of intel. The mission, of course, does get messy as the squad try to break away from Waller's control, and King Shark also ends up getting his head blown off. Number 1, Future's End. The Future's End alternate world is full of alternate versions of some of your favorite characters, and it also happens to include an alternate version of the Suicide Squad as well. They appear in the new Suicide Squad Future's End one-shot, once again reunited and led by Amanda Waller. However, at the beginning of the comic, it's revealed that this version of the Suicide Squad was split up and imprisoned in Bel Rev, before Amanda Waller broke in to reassemble her team. It's also revealed in this one-shot that while imprisoned, her team has been through hell. Harley Quinn has been forcibly given the steroid Venom while imprisoned, turning her into a hulking, muscle-bound version of herself who spends most of her day raging out. They attempted to give Deadshot a gun for an arm, amputating one of his arms and attempting to replace it, which didn't work, and Black Manta had his brain fried after they downloaded Deathstroke's fighting skills into his brain.
Number 10, Catwoman. Okay, so let me start off by saying, I know Catwoman isn't always a straight up supervillain. She has played both sides, but overall she sometimes is considered a villain, and so, it's always interesting to see her and Batman whenever they decide to team up and put whatever differences they had aside and work together to stop a common threat. Of course, this relationship ended up turning into something much, much more, and the two of them even almost got married. Number 9, Ocean Master. This one was very brief, but still pretty interesting, and I wonder if it'll be something that will ever be explored more on screen once Aquaman 2 ever comes out to theaters. But in the comics, Arthur and his half-brother were forced to work together to stop someone called the Scavenger. He was looking for a device that would grant him immortality, but in the process, it destroys the ocean. So in order to stop that, Aquaman and Ocean Master join forces to stop the Scavenger. And they do. But after it was all done, Ocean Master vowed to destroy Aquaman once and for all. Brotherly love. You gotta love it, am I right? Number 8, Harry Osborn. Now, Spider-Man 3 doesn't have the greatest reputation, and it's by no means a perfect film. Everyone knows that. But it still did have some cool scenes scattered throughout. And one of them was when Peter and Harry put aside their differences and worked together to take down Sandman and Venom. Seeing the best friends turned enemies work together one last time was a good way to really end their story arc. Their relationship was one of the best things about the trilogy, so fans were really happy to see it end in a satisfying way. And of course, good thing the two of them did work out their differences because Harry was unfortunately killed during that battle after being stabbed by Venom.
Number 7, Suicide Squad Black. This version of the team is still from Prime Earth, but features a new roster of villains / anti-heroes, combined with some familiar faces. The team was once again led by Amanda Waller and featured characters that she forced into action, like the main squad. The members throughout consisted of El Diablo, Azukur, Gentleman Ghost, Juniper, Tiamat, Wither, Clarion the Witch Boy, and Enchantress. A lot of mystical and magical characters on this team. This alternate version of the team referred to themselves as Suicide Squad Black, and appeared in their own limited series titled Suicide Squad Black Files. Number 6, David Ayer's Suicide Squad. Ayer's version of the Suicide Squad in the DCEU featured many familiar and recurring faces when it comes to the squad's members. Led by Amanda Waller, the team featured Harley Quinn, Deadshot, Enchantress, El Diablo, Captain Boomerang, and Katana. Not only was the film dark when it came to exploring the origins of many of these characters, their struggles, and all they had suffered through to become the villains they were today, but it was also dark because of the fact that Enchantress almost succeeded in kind of taking over the world. In the end, the Suicide Squad did manage to save the day, but had to eliminate Enchantress and the innocent June Moon, whom she possesses. Number 5, James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. Gunn's The Suicide Squad will actually be a soft reboot of the former team. His team and his feel of the Suicide Squad will likely be a lot different than Ayer's, although it still seems to have plenty of that Suicide Squad chaos that most fans enjoy. This time around, the team has a lot more members, reminding us once again of why exactly the team is referred to as the Suicide Squad, despite having the official government name of Task Force X. Because at any point, anyone can die. This team is sent on only the toughest missions, referred to as suicide missions, because for many they would be considered impossible. You can expect there will be more violence, explosions, and deaths in comparison to the first film. Considering that many of the members of the squad won't make it out alive, this film is likely to be a much darker take on the Suicide Squad when it comes to cinematics. Currently, the team roster includes Harley Quinn, Bloodsport, Peacemaker, The Thinker, Captain Boomerang, Blackguard, Polka Dot Man, Savant, King Shark, Weasel, Javelin, Ratcatcher 2, Soul Soria, TDK, and Mongol. Woo! With likely even more surprise members awaiting to be revealed throughout the duration of the film. Number 4, Telltale Games. In the Telltale Batman game, the Suicide Squad turn up once more, but this version of Amanda Waller's team is different when it comes to their roster. In the Telltale episode The Enemy Within, we learn that both Bane and Harley are on the team, and in a shocking twist, it's revealed that Catwoman is also part of the Suicide Squad. What? Which Waller is also using to apply pressure to Batman, which is pretty dark if you yourself are playing as the Dark Knight. And of course here, at this part, you are. Catwoman expresses, of course, that she did not join the team willingly and tries to warn Batman, but is shocked by Waller's collar before she can finish her sentence. Oh, and Amanda Waller also seems to want Batman to submit and also join her team. Pretty nuts.
Number 3, Kingpin. In one of Daredevil's greatest stories, Matt Murdock is sent to prison and everyone knows he is Daredevil. So, he is in prison with all of his greatest enemies. During the comic, titled The Devil Inside and Out, Matt is forced to work with Wilson Fisk in order to survive, and the result is a very entertaining series. It was one of the first times we really saw a hero get put into this position, like in prison and everyone knows who he is. It was entertaining, and to be honest, I was really hoping to see this adapted in the Daredevil TV show one day, because it would have been so freaking cool to see that version of Daredevil and that version of Kingpin work together in prison. But now, that will probably never happen. Still, pick up the comic if you haven't already. It's a really good read. Number 2, the whole DC multiverse. During the comic Crisis on Infinite Earths, basically every hero and villain were forced to work together in order to save the multiverse and stop the Anti-Monitor. Because, I mean, they didn't really have much of a choice, because there wouldn't really be a world for them to save or destroy, so they were forced to work together. It was a once-in-a-lifetime event, and it was really cool to see. Number 1, Deathstroke. Deathstroke has, he's teamed up with people before, but I am going to talk about the time when he did it in Arrow Season 5. In that season, Slade was locked up in a prison on Lian-Yu, and Oliver goes to him for help to take on Prometheus and his team. It was a truly epic moment, because a lot of fans never thought we would ever see Slade return to the show because of the restrictions DC puts on it. Oliver and Slade used to be friends. I mean, Slade trained him. But then Shadow died and Slade went crazy with Mirakuru, so their relationship took a turn. But it was so cool to see them reunite and team up together again on the same island where they first met and trained together. It felt like everything came full circle. The Arrow Season 5 finale is seriously one of the best episodes the show has ever done. And seeing Oliver and Slade team up made it even better. I still just get chills thinking about it.
In at number 10, Thanos and the Thing. The saying, "the enemy of my enemy is my friend," rings ever so true when it comes to the odd pairing of Thanos and the Thing. Ben Grimm has been part of the Fantastic Four for a long time and is well aware of the horrible villains that exist throughout the Marvel Universe. As a result of his space explorations with the Fantastic Four, he's come into contact with Thanos on a number of occasions. Recognizing just how dangerous the Mad Titan is, the Fantastic Four have shut down a number of evil plans Thanos had up his big gold glove. However, during the Secret Wars timeline, the narrative between the Thing and Thanos kind of changed. At the start, Ben Grimm was acting as the vast wall to protect the God Emperor Doom and was in charge of keeping out the people who sought to overthrow him. However, in comes Thanos, who took a different approach to breaching the wall. Instead, he leveled with the Thing and helped him escape this boring service of just acting like a wall. Thanos reminded Ben that the world was not right and that it needed him. Whether or not these words came with ill intentions, it was still a superhero supervillain team up against Dr. Doom that you wouldn't believe would ever exist. In at number 9, Dracula and the X-Men. The X-Men and Dracula have gone head to head on a number of occasions in the past. The Lord of Vampires even attempted to force Storm into marrying him. Gross. Although after some time it turned out they hated his son. You see, his son was planning a much more evil takeover than anything his father had ever attempted. Seeking to take his father's spot as the top vampire supervillain, he engineered this biological weapon. The weapon's purpose was to turn regular civilians into bloodthirsty vampires. In a surprising turn of events though, the X-Men, Dracula, and even Blade joined forces in order to restore order to the world. Although he was able to turn Jubilee right before they could defeat him, Dracula did give her an amulet that would combat this new fear of sunlight. Consider it a gift of appreciation to the X-Men. Still an unlikely team up. In at number 8, Nova and Carnage. During the event known as Axis, the Uncanny Avengers were attempting to stop the Red Skull who had stolen Charles Xavier's brain. I know, gross, right? In comes Magneto, who demolishes the villain, but accidentally unlocks this psionic energy within him that releases Onslaught into the universe. Now with Onslaught being the Uncanny Avengers' biggest threat, the Scarlet Witch decided to reverse the alignments of the heroes and villains. Carnage just happened to be amongst them when this went down, so in a strange turn of events, Carnage actually started to befriend Nova. Although this odd team up only lasted for a moment and purely out of circumstance, they were working together. Eventually the spell was reversed though, and Carnage went back to his usual crazy self.
Number 7, Alice. Alice and Kate Kane have a complicated relationship. I mean, considering, they are sisters. While the show Batwoman isn't perfect, one of the best things about it is the dynamic between Kate and Alice, and that was especially true when they were forced to work together in Season 1, Episode 16, titled Through the Looking Glass. Kate is forced to work with Alice to break Mouse out of Arkham Asylum. Seeing the two of them work together and break into Arkham was very cool, and seeing how their distinct styles clashed. I mean, Kate made sure that Alice wouldn't kill anyone, which Alice usually likes to do. Of course, it ends with Kate double-crossing her. But hey, it was still cool to see it while it lasted, and that dynamic is something fans are really gonna miss, since Kate is no longer going to be in the show in Season 2.
In at number 3, Super Skrull and Nova. This is a true tale of how just one team up could alter a character's whole reality. See, Super Skrull had been on the receiving end of mockery by his people for a long time after failing to take down the Fantastic Four. However, during the events of Annihilation, he put this behind him in order to protect his people not just from the Annihilation Wave, but soon Ultron as well. Super Skrull could not have done this alone though. Teaming up with Nova and his team of cosmic heroes, Super Skrull was finally able to redeem himself. With the help of Nova, he was able to return to his home, but this time he was praised for his efforts. They even made him a representative for intergalactic affairs. In at number 2, Doctor Doom and Doctor Strange. Sounds like a reality show. Right before Secret Wars, the majority of the Marvel multiverse was just beginning to collapse. Each unique world began crashing into one another, leaving almost nothing left. This catastrophic problem would require the universe's greatest minds to set aside their differences and combine their efforts in order to save, well, everything and everyone. The two people we're speaking about is Doctor Strange and Doctor Doom, along with some help by Molecule Man of course. The Beyonders happen to be the cause of all of these issues, so both men decided the only way was to steal their power. Eventually they succeeded, but this also enacted the new reign of the God Emperor Doom, who put Doctor Strange as kind of his right-hand man, making Strange essentially a sheriff that would uphold Doom's new laws. Last but not least, in our number 1 spot, Annihilus and the Avengers. As we reach the end of this list, it's funny to look at how some of these villains go from such evil plots to becoming key players in assisting the superheroes. Annihilus is one of those stories. Once known as the largest threat in the Marvel Universe, he used his cosmic control rod combined with his annihilation wave to leave nothing but total destruction throughout the cosmos. Eventually Nova and his alliance was able to put a stop to this madness, but Annihilus would soon return. However, this time he was in the form of a larvae which would regrow into his previous self. Soon enough though, Annihilus was now part of the Intergalactic Councils during the events of Infinity. This was the largest council of nations across space and even included the Avengers. At the time, the Avengers' main focus was attempting to stop the Builders from wiping out the universe, and as part of his new role, Annihilus lended a hand.
But coming in at number 10 is Hydra. To call Hydra a team isn't exactly a full truth. This organization is and has been comprised of not just notable villains like the Red Skull, Baron von Strucker, Gorgon, Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, Viper, Arnim Zola, Baron Helmut Zemo, Kingpin, Taskmaster, Absorbing Man, Bullseye, Crossbones, and many others, but there are also countless nameless henchmen and agents who all spout Hail Hydra. A notable mention going to Bob from the Deadpool comics. You're a good guy. As one of the commenters on part 1 made note of, Hydra isn't so powerful in the sense that they can absolutely obliterate foes, but they have something a lot of villains seem to lack: patience. The slow burn is their bread and butter, with slowly enacted plans that eventually lead them to almost secure world domination. Characters like Thor could punch as many dudes as he wants, but it's the members of Hydra who we don't even know about that are the real problem. What is actually insane to me is that Hydra has actually been around since pre-human time. It was a group of cold-blooded reptile-like aliens that planted the seeds that would eventually give rise to Hydra, with our earliest records of Hydra dating back to 3rd Dynasty Egypt. And at number 9, the Marauders. I think that a lot of mutant villain teams can give the Avengers a headache. As a commenter said in the last video, there is a reason that villains like Magneto and Apocalypse say that mutants are the superior species. Well, one of the cooler mutant villain groups out there, in my humble opinion, would be the Marauders. Originally, the Marauders were a group of mutant mercenaries working for the villain Mr. Sinister. They were formed by Gambit in order to eradicate the population of physically undesirable mutants mutants known as the Morlocks. To accomplish this task, Gambit called in Sabretooth, Arclight, Harpoon, Malice, Scalp Hunter, Scrambler, Vertigo, Riptide, Blockbuster, and Prism. The team has also been led by Magneto, Grey Crow, and Mystique at different points in time, and has also had villains like Ares, Chimera, Omega Sentinel, Polaris, Sunfire, and other unnamed soldiers. And as you might have guessed from Mr. Sinister's involvement, there have also been clones of these characters on the team as well. This group of mercenaries may not seem like the most powerful, but with such ruthless and unforgiving characters, they could easily do some damage to the Avengers. On a side note, if I hear someone bring up Rune King Thor again as if he was ever on the Avengers team with all that power, I'm gonna lose it. He was around for like 5 minutes and it was to stop Ragnarok and then he just went away. In at number 8 is the Hellfire Club. Similar to Hydra, again, the Hellfire Club are not exactly a team, but kind of. And also like Hydra, they play a much more subtle game in terms of their villainous ways. The Hellfire Club has been around since the 1700s, beginning as a British social elite club that would provide luxuries to its members that were not exactly legal or not exactly morally upstanding. But they had a secondary goal of putting together their financial wealth and political power to influence the world from the background for their own goals. While it has many members in different cities, some of which are just regular wealthy people, the group is run by its inner circle, many of whom are indeed powered, and more often than not, they are mutants. This group takes their names after different chess pieces with the black and white kings, queens, bishops, and knights. Now we've already talked about one of them with the White Queen Emma Frost, my bae. But there have been many other members and not all of them have been villainous. So specifically we're going to talk about the more evil ones. Names like Sebastian Shaw, Elias Bogan, Blackheart, Tom Cassidy, Mystique, Magneto, Trevor Fitzroy, Norman Osborn, Ezekiel Stane, Jason Wingard, Mountjoy, and Emma Steed have all been part of the Hellfire Club. While it isn't really an evil group anymore, with most of the current group made up of heroes, in its prime days of villainy, it absolutely caused problems for the world's heroes. Whoa. Are you subscribed to Top 10 Nerd? I mean, if you're watching this video, I can't imagine there's a reason you shouldn't be. If you like this content, make sure you do subscribe and stay tuned because we put out more videos just like this one every single day.
In at number 7, Galactus and Cosmic Ghost Rider. We know this list is supposed to be the top team-ups you won't believe exist, but I just have to add that this team-up is by far the coolest team-up ever, without a doubt. First of all, you have this possible future where Thanos just completely decimates the Earth, taking out all of the heroes, or so he thought. In comes Frank Castle, who survives and is now fueled by revenge. He cuts a deal with Mephisto to host the Spirit of Vengeance, although in his hunt for Thanos on Earth, he realizes that the Mad Titan had already left. Then you get the supervillain Galactus arriving to Earth, also in search of Thanos after barely making it through their battle. And the two make quite the team. In at number 6, Norman Osborn and the Sentry. This is a team up again that only really occurred out of pure circumstance. When learning about the details, you actually really start to sympathize with the Sentry and his inner struggles. After the final battle of the Secret Invasion, Norman Osborn swooped in, dispatching the Skrull Queen to be viewed as a national hero. Now with this prominent position in the public eye, he was made the new director of S.H.I.E.L.D. In this position, he formed what was known as the Dark Avengers. The majority of the team was comprised of villains, with the Sentry being one of the few superheroes who agreed to stay. You see, Norman had convinced Bob Reynolds that he understood his internal battles with the Void. Not only did he show the Sentry compassion, but he promised that he could help him keep control over it. In at number 5, Hank Pym and Ultron. Standing as one of the definitely more unique hero-villain team-ups, Hank Pym viewed his creation of Ultron as one of his greatest regrets. And after the events of Rage of Ultron, both Hank and Ultron had merged with one another. There's actually still a belief that traces of Hank can still be found within Ultron, even though he denied this when confronted by Adam Warlock in Infinity Countdown. This isn't necessarily a team-up for the sake of fighting off a greater force, but rather an attempt by Hank Pym to stop Ultron. Nonetheless, even forced together, the two had to still work with each other from time to time. In at number 4, Deathlock and Uncanny X-Force. With the Marvel Universe having so many alternate timelines and possible futures, the one that saw the rise of Deathlocks was perhaps the most grim. Many of the Marvel heroes were converted into Deathlocks, which became a mandate just like the Superhuman Registration Act. Cut to present day, the Deathlocks arrived attempting to steal Phantom X's artificial portable biome, which was called the World. Deathlock Prime was able to overpower these new violent tendencies with logic and reasoning. With his newfound hope, he sought to help Phantom X against his former team. He actually succeeds in protecting the world, and as a result of his good deed, he teams up with the X-Force. Over time, Deathlock established himself as a friend of the X-Men and even began to lecture at Logan's Jean Grey School.
Number 3. The Cabal. In the last list, we spoke about the group called the Cabal that was formed by Namor the Submariner to combat the multiversal incursions. But for part 2, we're going to talk about the other Cabal. This version of the Cabal was a secret group created alongside the Dark Avengers by Norman Osborn when he became the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., which he renamed to Hammer. This group was basically the villainous version of the Illuminati, and it consisted of some pretty powerful villains. Obviously, we have Norman Osborn himself, who in my opinion is probably the weakest member of the group in terms of raw power, because next to him we had Emma Frost, an Omega class telepath, the White Queen of the Hellfire Club, and sometimes headmistress of Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. We also had Namor the Submariner, who, well, I think he kinda sucks, but he's the king of Atlantis, Loki of Asgard, who was the whole reason the Avengers formed in the first place, the Hood, who was a skilled sorcerer and powerful crime lord, and as the icing on the cake, they had Dr. Doom of Latveria, who really doesn't even need much of an introduction. Taskmaster was also part of this group as well for a little bit, so yes, this team was highly capable. Unfortunately for them, their alliance was tenuous at best, as it usually is with villainous teams. And at number 2 is the Legion of Doom. So we talked about the crime syndicate from the DC universe, but what would be even more compelling than that would be to see how a group of actual Prime Earth DC villains would do against the Avengers. And why not pick the Legion of Doom as that group? The Legion of Doom is made up of probably the most prominent of the Justice League's individual villains. I mean, we've got Lex Luthor founding this team and being backed up by Black Manta, Cheetah, Gorilla Grodd, the Joker, and Sinestro. But that's just the original group. Currently, it consists of Amazo, Black Hand, Brainiac, Captain Boomerang, Captain Cold, Golden Glider, Heatwave, Punchline, Scarecrow, Vandal Savage, and Weather Wizard, plus all the original members who I just mentioned. And it at one point even had Black Adam, Mr. Freeze, and Ra's al Ghul. This team would absolutely crush the Avengers, and that's hard for me to even say because I definitely prefer Marvel over DC. There's just no doubt in my mind. Well, except, of course, if Joker does his usual thing and betrays them, or whatever, or they can't get along, or the heroes have to win because that's just how it goes with comic books. Barring those 3 things, they would crush. Anyways, in for number 1, and for my last trick, I will talk about a group of villains from neither Marvel or DC. No, for our number 1 spot, we're gonna talk about the Viltrum Empire from Image Comics' Invincible series. Again, a loose definition of the word team, but I mean, if you're all from the same planet with the same goal of ensuring the survivability of your race, that's kind of like a team, a very large team. But the Avengers have faced off against entire races of species before, so I don't know. While they have faced off against other races, the Viltrumites, this is a race of absolutely mind-bogglingly strong humanoids who are next to impossible to take down and who just come back stronger after they heal. Just 3 Viltrumites were able to fly through a planet and completely obliterate it. The Grand Regent of the Viltrumites himself, Thrag, was able to tank some of the most powerful of the heroes that the Earth had to offer, and even the strongest of his own race were absolutely terrified of him. I mean, the final climactic battle between Invincible and Thrag saw the two going punch for punch inside of our sun, and it still took them a good little while to actually being worn down by that fight. This is a race of Superman-like beings the Avengers would not stand a tiny little chance against.